Chapter 46-51. In the end, Song Jichio got Suwon. After getting along with each other for half a year, their relationship grew deeper and deeper. Song Jichio tolerated Suwon. Because of Suwon, she even smiled more often than before. We didn't expect that because we didn't know Song Jichio well. He was dull and needed a girl who liked to laugh and play. Suwon was right for him. Suwon needed a boyfriend who could tolerate everything about her. Song Jichio, who was steady, could tolerate her. In this way, it was not strange that they could be together. Yi Qian said in a low voice, which made He Jing, who was sensitive, feel a trace of sweetness. You and he are the same, aren't you? You never thought that two people who had nothing to do with each other would become your boyfriend. However, one day, he really became your boyfriend. You were surprised, hesitant, and at a loss. But you also had a trace of expectation, right? He Jing said with a smile. Then she saw Yi Qian's white cheeks blush. Ha ha. Every time they talked about the affairs between men and women, she would blush. Blush again. Blush again. Your blushing problem. I really want to bully you more. Yi Qian patted his face with one hand and refused to admit it. I'm not blushing. I'm blushing because of the wind. Let's go. The exam is important. Let's stop chatting. It's not chatting. I've been thinking about whose wedding I'll attend first after graduation. By the way, when we have babies, I'll be the godmother of your babies. The more they talked, the more irrelevant they were. They were talking about babies. Yi Qian quickened his pace and rushed to the library. Babies. She and Captain Xia would not have babies in a short time. Even if they got married, they would not have babies so early. Would the elders in her family urge her to have babies? Family Xia's grandpa and grandma must be eager to have great-grandchildren. Last time when she went back to the old house, her family Xia's grandma teased her that she must work hard to take care of herself and hold her and Laoyo's babies. Her grandpa nodded and said that he would take good care of himself, too. It was obvious that the elders in the family wanted to see her and Captain Xia's child as soon as possible. She wondered what her child with Captain Xia would be like. With Captain Xia's genes, it shouldn't be too bad. The girl would look like her, and the boy would look like Captain Xia. It was quite beautiful just thinking about it. Yi Qian, who had been led astray by He Jing, was thinking about all sorts of things as he walked briskly. By the time he entered the library, his face was even redder than before. He was thinking too much. How could he not blush? This time, He Jing really thought that she was bragging. The library became the place where Yi Qian frequented the most during the first 3 days of the holiday. When all the exams were over, Yi Qian stood on the scale and saw that she had lost 5 kilograms in the middle of winter. Suwon stared at the numbers on the screen and rubbed her forehead in pain. I don't believe it. It's fake, it's fake. Why did I only lose half a kilogram? Because Jane Eyre and I don't have anyone to take care of us, but you do. He Jing, who had also lost 5 kilograms, smiled and mocked her roommate who had always wanted to lose weight but could not do so. God is fair. You can have your cake and eat it too. Yi Qian, who had put on his shoes, also smiled and said, Anyway, you've lost half a kilogram. It's pretty good. You'll be with Song Jichio for the rest of the winter holiday. I guess you'll be fatter. This winter holiday, Suwon and Song Jichio would stay on duty at school. They would even spend the Chinese New Year at school. After receiving the notice, Suwon hid under the quilt and laughed secretly for a long time. Song Jichio was even more shameless. She was so happy that her white teeth could be seen from afar. Chapter 46-52. Usually Yi Qian would be the busiest during the winter vacation. However, it was different this year. She could go home early for the vacation. Moreover, she had already booked the plane ticket. She would fly back to Jing City at 11 o'clock the next morning. He Jing did not stay in school. However, she had to go on a business trip with the instructor. It would take her about 10 days to write the report after she came back. The next morning, they walked Yi Qian to the school gate and left. Looking at the airport bus that was leaving, Su-Wen sighed. It's my first time to walk Yi Qian home. She used to leave without saying anything. I don't even know when she left school. She has been busy for so long. It's time for her to have a relaxing vacation. He Jing, who also walked Yi Qian home for the first time, sighed softly. Looking at the traffic coming and going, she said in a melancholy voice, "After the winter vacation, it will be the last semester. The final exam will be in April. Then it will be May. After May, June will come. The three of us will go our separate ways." Speaking of this, Su-Wen felt a little depressed. She kicked the low cylindrical road softly with her toes. After a long time, she said in a muffled voice, "Have you ever thought about taking the postgraduate entrance exam? Do you want to take the exam?" He Jing was stunned and shook her head. "No. My family condition doesn't allow me to continue my studies. I will obey the arrangement immediately after graduation." She paused for a while. Seeming to think of something, she asked in a much lower voice, "Is this your plan? Why didn't I hear you mention it before?" Song Jiqiu suggested that I take the postgraduate entrance exam until I take the exam. My family also hopes so. I didn't think about it before. Now that both sides have suggested it, I am a little tempted. What about Song Jiqiu? What plans does she have? Take the postgraduate entrance exam together. I am tempted because she also wants to take the exam. Then what are you thinking about? Of course. How great it is to take the exam together. As long as the conditions allow, you can continue your studies. You don't have to think about it. I think it's great. He Jing smiled. Although the single-eyed female soldier liked to pick on Su-Wen, she was also sincere to Su-Wen. As long as my family supports me, I will have no worries. I can really continue my studies. What do you have to worry about? Do you think you can't take the exam? Shame? Su-Wen silently glanced at her comrade who hit the nail on the head. The resentment in her eyes made He Jing laugh unkindly. "Ha ha ha, did I really hit the nail on the head? Ha ha ha, you're also afraid of losing face. Are you afraid that Song Jiqiu, who can successfully take the postgraduate entrance examination and successfully study for her doctorate, will despise you? Save me some face, brother. I've been mentally exhausted during this period of time, and you're still making fun of me." Su-Wen rolled his eyes fiercely. "If you laugh again, we'll break off our friendship." It was impossible to break off their friendship. After He Jing laughed wildly, she cleared her throat and raised her hand to pat the shoulder of her comrade, who was not confident about the entrance examination for postgraduate studies and doctorate. She said, "Don't worry, bro. With Song Jiqiu's help, you will definitely pass the examination. Since someone like him dares to let you take the postgraduate entrance exam, it means that he already has a detailed plan. Take care, brother. You're starting to sign up for the postgraduate entrance exam. However, your decision is too late. You should start preparing in your third year." "Oh, that's right. You guys haven't been together in your third year. You only decided to take the postgraduate entrance exam in your fourth year, so you didn't have much time to prepare. No wonder you're not confident. You'd better give it a try. If you don't try, how will you know whether you can pass or not? What if you pass the examination? Time is tight. You'd better ask Song Jiqiu to hurry up and prepare for the exam. Fortunately, little Jane Eyre has been supervising you these years. You haven't been held back. It's still possible for you to make a breakthrough." Chapter 46-53. Since it was about Su-Wen's future development, He Jing, who usually didn't talk much, said, "If Jane Eyre were here, she would definitely support you. If you really can't make up your mind, why don't you call Jane Eyre now? You should have told us last night so that Jane Eyre could give you some suggestions face to face." Su-Wen listened carefully. "Since you support me, I can give it a try. I'll ask Jane Eyre again." As she spoke, she took out the cell phone that she had received after the exam yesterday and called Yi Qian's cell phone. The first time she called, the line was busy. The second time she called, the line was still busy. When Suwon remembered to call again, Yi Qian's cell phone was turned off. Suwon looked at the time displayed on the cell phone. It was 3:20 in the afternoon. Normally, Yi Qian should have already arrived in Beijing and his cell phone should have been turned on. Why is his cell phone still turned off? Don't tell me something happened, she murmured. Song Jiqiu, who was reading beside her, didn't even raise her head. She said calmly, maybe the plane was delayed because of the weather. Try again later. Send a message to her and ask her to call you back as soon as she turns on her cell phone. Suwon obeyed and sent a message to Yi Qian. It wasn't until 7 o'clock in the evening that Suwon finally received Yi Qian's reply. The content was very simple. Arrived safely. My cell phone is temporarily unavailable. I'll contact you when I'm free. After reading the message, Suwon's heart skipped a beat. She handed the cell phone to Song Jiqiu. What does that mean? I'm home. Why can't my cell phone be used temporarily? Song Jiqiu, who had been studying materials for the postgraduate entrance examination with her girlfriend all day long, leaned forward to read the message. She slightly pursed her lips, and a trace of darkness flashed in her eyes. She smiled and said, nothing. Who would stare at their cell phones when they're home? They must be with their families. She'll contact you when she's free. Be good. Don't think too much. You'd better hurry up and take the postgraduate entrance examination. As she spoke, she naturally reached out to take Suwon's cell phone and put it in her pocket. My cell phone is temporarily unavailable. It seems that Yi Qian is doing something unknown and dangerous again. It wasn't a matter, but a mission. They were still working hard for the postgraduate entrance exam and were confused about which unit they would go to in the future. However, Yi Qian, who was always at the forefront of all the students, had already determined his direction and adapted in advance. Song Jiqiu looked at her girlfriend, who was reading the book seriously, and a faint smile appeared in her eyes. Fortunately, Yi Qian, who had a plan for the future, had been keeping an eye on Suwon. Otherwise, he would not have proposed to take the postgraduate entrance examination. He hoped that she would be able to return safely. With her abilities, she would definitely be able to return safely. See you next year, comrade. In the quiet library, there were people working hard for their future. Meanwhile, Yi Qian, who had received a phone call about a refund and rebooking, was already sitting in an inconspicuous black sedan. Other than her and the driver, there were 2 other people in the car. This is the information of all the missing girls. They all dropped out of school early to work because their families were poor. Last March, the anti-drug police intercepted a batch of new drugs, which was also the beginning of the disappearance of these girls. The man sitting in the back seat handed a stack of documents to Yi Qian. At the same time, there were several photos attached. If the families of these girls hadn't reported the case, no one would have realized that so many girls had gone missing. The investigating police also didn't think that their disappearance might be controlled by transnational drug dealers. It was not until last week that the anti-drug police found a new clue that the two were connected. During the day, when Yi Qian went to the airport, she received a call from Major General Yang. After a 5-minute call, Major General Yang changed her itinerary from flying to Jing City to flying to Yun Province. Chapter 46-54. Yun Province was the province Yi Qian frequented the most. Every mission she carried out was more dangerous and more difficult than the last. And now, Yi Qian lowered her eyes as she walked. Her slender fingers unconsciously rubbed the corner of her clothes. Her beautiful face darkened. It's a dangerous trip. Write a letter to whoever you want. If you can come back, tear it up. If you can't, on the other end of the phone, Major General Yang said in a low voice. It was very, very heavy, like a huge rock sinking to the bottom of the sea. If you can't come back, This letter will be a suicide note. Her fingers touched her pocket lightly. The folded letter had clear edges. She just needed to put it in an envelope and give it to the anti-narcotics team. If you can't come back, this letter will be given to her lover, who will then pass it on to his family. It's a dangerous trip. It's the first time she wrote a suicide note. Yi Qian arrived at Yun Province's Cheli City at 11:00 at night. She followed 2 anti-narcotics police officers through a dimly lit corridor. After 2 turns, they arrived at the 3-story office of the anti-narcotics police in Cheli City. The office was small, but the training ground was quite large. Walking along the corridor, the right-hand side of the corridor was filled with training grounds. Vaguely, they could even hear the low growls of drug detection dogs. This area was about the size of 2 football fields, and it was the training ground for drug detection police officers to train drug detection dogs. The 2 anti-narcotics police officers who led the way only gave Yi Qian a brief introduction of their work environment. The most they talked about was Cheli City. Cheli City was located on both sides of the Lansong River Fault Zone. The terrain was mountainous, high in the north and low in the south. The mountains were high on both sides and low in the middle. The south was bordered by Myanmar. Cheli City was the closest county city to the Golden Triangle. It was also where Yi Qian was staying tonight. Entering the 3-story office building, the most eye-catching thing was not the solemn police badge, but a black and white wall. The wall was filled with black and white photos. There were no names, no introductions, just photos. The photos were in glass frames. The bottom of the frame was lit with a white band. As soon as Yi Qian walked in, she felt like a heavy hammer was coming at her. It hit her hard in the chest. In an instant, the qi and blood in his chest surged, but his back was covered in layers of cold. There were no names or introductions, just rows and rows of black and white photos on the wall. Yi Qian understood without needing the 2 narcotics officers to explain. There were rows and rows of photos, all of which were of the police officers who had sacrificed themselves in the fight against drugs. Yi Jian slowed down her pace and asked the 2 anti-narcotics police officers, "Can I stop for a while?" She was still wearing the old-fashioned police uniform from the 80s, which was loose and loose. She was in a dull pain in her heart. "Can I stop for a while?" When they entered the office building, the 2 narcotics squad officers nodded slightly and accompanied Yi Qian to the Wall of Martyrs. Yi Qian bowed deeply and did not straighten his back for a long time. The 2 narcotics officers who accompanied him also bowed and saluted their comrades who had fought side by side with him. Yi Qian, who did not leave immediately, looked at the black and white photos from the first photo to the last one. There were a total of 153 black and white photos. The last photo was obviously the most recent one. The face was very young, but the eyes were filled with a sharpness that could make a drug dealer have nowhere to hide. He died in December. He was newly married for less than half a year. His newlywed wife was 4 months pregnant. The first night, he told us that he was going to be a father. The next night, he was gone at 6:00. Chapter 46:55. The narcotics officer standing to the left of Yi Qian said in a low voice. In the empty hall, Yi Qian could feel the sorrow in his voice coming from the depths of his soul. It was indelible, and had become a wound that would be there for the rest of his life and would never heal. Last year, a total of 18 people died in my team. Every month, there would be a few days when it rained. Some were shot, some were stabbed in the back, some were reported by drug addicts, and some were killed by drug dealers. It's a common occurrence here. This is just the photo wall of my comrades who died in my team. It's a little small. The last sentence, "the photo wall is a little small," made Yi Qian's eyes brim with tears. If it was small, it meant that there would be more sacrifices in the future. There would be more black and white photos placed on the black and white wall. Yi Qian saluted all the martyrs on the Wall of Martyrs. She pursed her lips and followed the 2 narcotics officers to the second floor. The office building was a little dark. In the hall on the first floor, other than a set of lights on the photo wall, there were only 2 spotlights on the left side of the hall. One of the spotlights was on near the staircase, and the other was on near the corridor on the left. The hall was in the middle, and the staircase was on both sides. With only 2 spotlights illuminating the hall, it was pitch black all around. If a timid person were to walk through the hall alone, they would probably be scared. The hall was very quiet, so quiet that they could hear the echoes of their footsteps. Yi Jian, who was following closely behind the 2 anti-narcotics policemen, clenched her fingers. She didn't know why she always felt that someone was watching her in the dark. There was no malice. It was just a look. After passing through the hall and heading to the staircase on the left, the 2 narcotics officers who were leading the way motioned for Yi Qian to go upstairs first. Yi Qian, who was already feeling strange, suddenly moved to the side. Immediately after, a dark shadow appeared at the entrance of the dark staircase and rushed towards Yi Qian. The moment the black shadow appeared, the 2 narcotics officers who were leading the way pushed open the office door next to the staircase. The 2 of them entered in a flash and locked the door behind them. Without any warning, Yi Qian instantly understood that the narcotics squad was testing her. The more cautious they were, the more it showed that this mission was extraordinarily dangerous. The will, the probing, and the wall of martyrs all told Yi Qian that he might never return from this trip. The only 2 spotlights in the hall were also extinguished. Aside from the wall of martyrs, the entire hall was pitch black. It was so dark that one could not even see their own fingers. Yi Qian leaned against the cool wall. She could no longer use her eyes to look for danger. She calmed herself down and used her ears to listen to her surroundings. She tried to listen for the faint sounds of breathing coming from somewhere. She reached for her waist and heard the sound of a metal button being unfastened. Yi Jian quickly pulled out the belt from her waist and used it as a weapon. Then, she used her strength to shake off the breathing sound closest to her. Pa! The belt she flung out was like a sword piercing through the air. With lightning speed, it struck a dark shadow that was hiding at the bottom of the staircase. The shadow was slowly approaching Yi Qian. Yi Qian didn't know exactly which part of the shadow the belt hit. She only knew that she successfully heard the sound of the belt hitting the shadow. The shadow that was hit by the belt was in so much pain that her teeth cracked. Her facial features were distorted. This female soldier who came back. Her reaction was much faster than the 7 female soldiers and policewomen from before. Although it was painful, the shadow smiled excitedly. Chapter 46-56. They needed a female soldier with superior intelligence, stamina, and brainpower. They had been looking for her since half a year ago, and they had selected a total of 7 suitable female soldiers and policewomen to come to Cherry City. Although they were indeed quite outstanding, they still did not pass the preliminary assessment. There was a policewoman who had just returned from studying abroad. She was excellent in all aspects. She could fight, and her IQ was also above average. However, in the end, she failed because she did not know how to disguise. No matter how she disguised herself, her temperament could not fool people. She could let an experienced drug dealer see that she was an anti-narcotics police officer at a glance. There was really only one last level left. After passing the disguise level, the cute policewoman, who even had a cute name, would become the only undercover in this mission. However, she failed at this level. Even she herself said that she was lacking in disguise. There must not be any flaws, but perfection. In the end, this policewoman named Nian Nian from a special police force in the capital failed the assessment. She was still recovering in the anti-narcotics force with regret. The black shadow who licked the tip of his tongue rubbed his arm that was burning with pain from being whipped by the belt. He held his breath and quickly pushed open an unlocked office. He flashed in and immediately locked the door. He first tried to test the water. He was very satisfied with the female soldier's quick reaction. Although the female SWAT officer Nian Nian, who had almost become an undercover agent, had reacted rather quickly as well. She was still a beat slower than this cadet who had just arrived. "Boss, there's probably some hope this time. I was whipped by her." "No, I was whipped by a belt." In addition to the black shadow who just entered the office, there was another black shadow sitting on the desk. There was a red glow between his fingers. It was a lit cigarette that was slowly burning between his fingers. "Don't worry. Whether it's good or bad, we'll only know after we pass the last level," the black shadow holding the cigarette said with a hoarse voice. He then took a deep puff of the cigarette until the red glow continued to light up and then suddenly extinguished. "Smoke less. Your throat is hoarse," the black shadow who came in reminded him softly. He walked to the desk and turned on the desk lamp. Then he turned the light source down. The square room was lit up, but the faces of the two black shadows could not be seen clearly. The black shadow who turned on the light took off his jacket and underwear, revealing his muscular upper body. He reached his arm under the table lamp and looked at it. Good heavens, he didn't even need to wait until tomorrow. It was already swollen. The black figure who was smoking turned around to take a look. He let out a cry of surprise and extinguished the cigarette in the ashtray. His gaze was fixed on his subordinate's red and swollen arm for a few seconds. Then, he smiled and said, "Looks like a ruthless female soldier. Not bad, I'm afraid she's not ruthless enough. When it's over, use a bottle of safflower oil and rub it. I didn't even have time to dodge before I was beaten up. I was injured the first time I appeared. No matter how good that anniversary was, she only managed to injure us towards the end. This time, the military academy cadet sent by the military headquarters personally, I think there's still a chance. Boss, we can't pick anymore. If we continue to pick, when will we be able to close the case? How many girls in the stockade would go missing? That should be enough. Since I can't come back this time, I'd better look for an anniversary. If she doesn't know how to disguise herself, then she should learn how to disguise herself. Train her for about 3 days. With her comprehension, she will definitely pass. Today, a few of us went to see her. She even asked us to let her try again. Old AI talked too much, and said that there would be another female soldier coming tonight. Anniversary didn't say much. She looked quite disappointed. Chapter 4657. Boss was Captain Deng of Cherry City's narcotics squad. His squad was responsible for narcotics operations from Cherry City all the way to Nansan, which was closest to the Golden Triangle. They cooperated with the border anti-narcotics police and guarded the country's borders to prevent drugs from flowing out of the Golden Triangle. His head was worth as much as $1 million on the black market. It had increased by $500,000 since last October, and now it was worth $1.5 million. There were countless drug dealers who wanted to kill him, and he wanted to kill countless drug dealers as well. Captain Deng was only 45 years old. He graduated from the police academy at the age of 21 and was assigned to Yun Province as a narcotics police officer. Even he didn't know how heavy the drugs he had seized were. He didn't know how many drug dealers he had caught and how many drug dealers wanted him dead. No matter how dangerous it was, Captain Deng never thought of retiring from his current position. In his words, even if he had to die, he wanted to drag a few more drug dealers down with him. Captain Deng, who was hated to the core by the drug dealers, pulled out a chair and sat down with a tired face. He reached out to pick up the cigarette box on his desk, but the injured subordinate took it away. "Today's over, boss. Sister-in-law told us that you can only smoke 3 cigarettes a day." Captain Deng wasn't addicted to smoking, but he would smoke when he was in a bad mood. Hearing this, he retracted his hand, crossed his arms, leaned his head against the back of the chair, and slowly said, "We can't be similar. There's a lesson before, so we can't be similar anymore. We must find the most suitable person." The subordinate in uniform fell silent. There was a lesson before. It referred to a female undercover officer 2 years ago. In the end, she was accidentally found brutally murdered by a drug dealer. The squad received a set of bloodied clothes without sleeves, a pair of bloodied pants that had turned into shorts, and a head of hair that was stuck to the skull. It meant cutting off the hands, legs, and skulls. The cruelty made the eyes of all the narcotics officers in the squad turn red and cry. This time, they had to send another undercover officer. The tragedy from 2 years ago couldn't be repeated, so it had to be perfect. Outside, Yi Qian, who was being tested, stood on the stairs to the second floor for a long time. There were people lying in ambush on the stairs and around the stairs. She didn't know whether to go up or down, and there wasn't just one shadow, there were 6 of them. They were all narcotics officers who were deep in the field. They were going to test the abilities of the female soldier, and see if she could take on this undercover mission. "Go!" a black shadow said in a low voice. The voice slid across the blade and entered Yi Jian's ears with a sharp edge that could make one bleed. Yi Qian, who was about to rush to the second floor, was forced to retreat. Eyes. Yi Qian. Calm. Yi Qian. Yi Qian. The sneak attackers all had daggers or similar weapons in their hands, but she only had a belt in her hands. She had to take it easy. She couldn't let them cut her belt into pieces. There were already shadows lying in ambush at the bottom of the stairs. Yi Qian leaped from the top of the stairs. The ambushing shadow held a knife in one hand. Without any hesitation, he stabbed at Yi Qian with a murderous intent. Yi Qian heard 6 breathing sounds, but she didn't hear the other breathing sound at the bottom of the stairs. Chapter 46-58. The black shadow rushed out. Even though she had noticed it, it was too late. She couldn't avoid all of them. She could only try her best to avoid getting hit in her vital parts. Yi Qian, who was on the ground, reached out with one hand and grabbed the iron bar of the bar. Using the strength of her arm to support her body, she lifted her slender and straight leg and kicked the black shadow hard. Rip, even though Yi Qian reacted in time and was prepared, the black shadow still used the dagger in his hand to cut Yi Qian's pants and cut Yi Qian's calf. The stinging pain came instantly. Yi Qian even felt a warm liquid soaking into her leggings. She needed to go to one of the 3 major drug sources in the world, the Golden Triangle, which had very little economic and cultural contact with developed areas. Even the country had a hard time controlling it effectively. She was going alone. When she would return depended on when she found out about the drug trafficking route that controlled the missing girls. Whether she could return alive depended on herself. Therefore, in order to ensure that the spies sent out by the narcotics department could return alive, this assessment was held. Several people had already been assessed, including Nian Nian, who had been abroad for a year. None of them had passed Captain Deng's assessment. Now it was Yi Qian's turn. The black shadows used 2 types of attack: encirclement and attrition. First, 3 people forced Yi Qian to retreat. Then, 3 more people came out and waved their knives at Yi Qian. Although it was an assessment, it was a real assessment. It was normal to get hurt. Yi Jian did not let them force her into the narrow aisle. She tightened her belt around an anti-narcotics policeman's iron arm and slammed him forward. When the 2 of them were knocked down, Yi Jian pressed her elbow against the anti-narcotics policeman's chest. The moment she fell to the ground, she exerted her strength and flipped over above the anti-narcotics policeman's head. She broke out of the encirclement and retreated into the spacious hall. The consequence of breaking out of the encirclement was that her only weapon, the belt, was gone. It was wrapped around the officer's arm, and she couldn't retrieve it. Because they were entering Yun province, Yi Qian kept the silver thread in his luggage as a precaution. His luggage was held by the 2 anti-narcotics police officers who were leading the way. She had no way of retrieving it. Yi Qian faced the anti-narcotics police with knives hidden in the dark, barehanded, 1 against 6. Fighting 1 against 6 was not an easy task, not to mention the fact that they all had daggers in their hands. They did not even try to dodge the attacks, but instead stabbed at Yi Qian fiercely, treating him like a drug dealer. Without his belt, Yi Qian took off his jacket and wrapped it in his hands as he faced the attacks of the 6 black shadows. From time to time, the fighting figures flashed across the glass surface of the long wall of martyrs' frame. More than 150 anti-drug martyrs who had sacrificed themselves silently watched, as if they were protecting and looking forward to what was to come. A narcotics officer was knocked down by Yi Qian. At the same time, he snatched the dagger and pressed it against the officer's neck. Because he used too much force, the sharp edge of the dagger cut through the officer's skin and traces of blood flowed out. Before Yi Qian could catch his breath, another narcotics officer came straight at him with a bayonet. His movements were so fierce that Yi Qian's pupils contracted. She quickly retracted her dagger and dodged. The narcotics officer, whose dagger was snatched away by Yi Qian, got up and retreated to the side. He was no longer qualified to participate in the assessment of female soldiers. There were still 5 people left. Yi Qian needed to defeat all 5 of them to pass the first round of combat assessment. There were no guns or ammunition. It was a pure life and death battle. For Yi Qian, the difficulty was still acceptable. He could handle it. Chapter 46-59. The anti-narcotics police officers fighting Yi Qian were not ordinary anti-narcotics police officers. They were all on the most dangerous front lines, chasing after drug traffickers. Each of them had made countless contributions and were very capable. As long as they were hit by their punches and kicks, they would be in so much pain that their facial features would be hideous. Yi Jian was no exception. His back was kicked hard by an anti-narcotics police officer behind him. Yi Jian let out a muffled groan as he fell forward. The anti-narcotics police officer in front was even faster. He raised his long leg and kicked Yi Qian, who was falling forward. If he was kicked this time, Yi Qian would definitely be kicked back again and beaten to death by the anti-narcotics police officers behind him. They would really beat Yi Qian to death without mercy and without putting on a show. They would use all the ferocity they had against drug traffickers and deal with Yi Qian one move at a time. They had to do this. They had to figure out whether female soldiers were feasible before deciding whether to continue. Carelessly and casually was definitely not acceptable. If they just let it go, the tragedy from 2 years ago might happen again. Therefore, they could not allow it to happen again. Yi Qian felt pain in her back, and she was kicked in the chest. Her blood was boiling. She saw that her chest was being kicked again. In an instant, she grabbed hold of the long leg that was coming at her. Her dark eyes were filled with anger. She finally found her balance after being kicked. She grabbed hold of the leg that was coming at her and stabilized her body. Then, she took quick steps forward and slammed her whole body into the anti-narcotics police officer. One of the anti-narcotics police officer's legs was caught by Yi Qian. He was unable to break free. His other leg was used as a center of gravity. How could he resist Yi Qian, who was charging at him at full force? His whole body was flipped over by Yi Qian. Bang! The anti-narcotics police officer who was flipped over fell on his back. Yi Qian did not let go of his leg. Her eyes were bloodshot. She spun around and sat on the officer's knee. She used all her strength to hold his leg back. Arg, this was not an ordinary pain. It was so painful that the narcotics officer growled in pain. I admit defeat, I admit defeat. If I pull it out any further, my right leg will be crippled for 3 months. He did not want to see a drug enforcement officer with a broken bone immediately admit defeat. He was afraid that if he spoke 1 second later, the red-eyed military school student would really cripple his right leg. Yi Qian released her grip and stood up vigorously. The sharp blade of the dagger in her hand was facing outwards, the tip of the dagger parallel to her elbow and wrist. She stared at the 4 narcotics officers with a fierce look in her eyes. Suddenly, she stepped forward and assumed an attacking stance. Just when the 4 narcotics officers thought that she was going to attack, Yi Qian suddenly made a big turn and ran directly toward the staircase leading to the second floor. She needed to go up to the second floor, but these anti-drug police were preventing her from going up to the second floor. Then, could it be that as long as she went up to the second floor, she would be considered to have passed this obstacle? As the thought flashed through her mind, Yi Jian immediately put it into action. She made a feint attack to distract the attention of the 4 anti-narcotics policemen. Then, she made a sudden change to catch the 4 anti-narcotics policemen off guard, thus achieving her real goal. She rushed out very quickly. The 4 narcotics officers only saw a shadow flash before their eyes. The military school student who had been standing in front of them just a moment ago was already heading for the staircase. Stop her! It was impossible to guard against such a sudden change. The 4 narcotics officers who had a flash of surprise in their eyes quickly chased after her. Her zodiac is the rabbit. That's fast. Not bad. She's better than Yen Yen. Chapter 4660. The narcotics squad officer who had been eliminated laughed and chatted. Although he had been beaten up, he was really happy. The narcotics squad officer, whose dagger had been pressed down by Yi Qian and whose neck had been scratched by Yi Qian, raised his hand and touched his neck, which was still tingling slightly. He whispered to his colleague, "I have a feeling that we've found the right person this time. He's very strong and took very little time to finish us off. He's very agile and has sharp judgment. He's indeed better than the previous people." The narcotics squad officer, who had almost had his right leg crippled by Yi Qian, was not as optimistic as his colleague. He frowned as he listened to the sound of chaotic footsteps and the sound of fighting again. He lowered his voice and said in a low voice, "We'll only know if we pass the last round. I hope we pass. I hope we can satisfy the boss." After he finished speaking, his gaze fell on the wall of martyrs. His heavy gaze did not need to search. The first thing he saw was a black and white photo of a policewoman. The policewoman in the photo had the same solemn expression as all her comrades who had sacrificed themselves. The corners of her mouth were slightly pursed, and her sharp eyes looked straight ahead. She was the policewoman who had sacrificed herself 2 years ago. Her body had not been found until now. There were rumors that her body had been eaten by a tiger fed by a drug lord. She was the 16th martyr whose body had not been found. She was also the most tragic martyr in recent years. She had become the pain of the entire narcotics squad and the pain of their boss, Captain Deng. The other narcotics squad officer also looked at the wall of martyrs. The two of them stood quietly and looked at each other quietly. Time had condensed into sadness, and it made the corners of their eyes sparkle with faint tears. All the black and white photos on the wall were taken on the first day of employment. Therefore, everyone's expression was the same. They were solemn and not restrained by smiles. The first thing they did on the first day of employment was to take photos. They had to wear their uniforms and caps when taking photos. They had to be serious and could not smile. In fact, no matter how good their mood was at the time, they would become silent and solemn after hearing the reason why they had to take photos on the first day of employment. This was because this photo was not only their employment ID photo, but also their posthumous photo one day. No one could smile. They took the photos with complicated and reverent feelings. The two narcotics squad officers quietly looked at their comrades who had once fought side by side and now only had photos of them. If no one disturbed them, they would probably be able to stand there until dawn. The moment Yi Qian rushed to the second floor and kicked a narcotics squad officer who had chased after him down the stairs, the originally pitch-black office. All the lights. The narcotics officer who was kicked down the stairs by Yi Jian grabbed onto the handrail with one hand and barely managed to stabilize himself. Otherwise, he would have fallen headfirst and ended up with his head stuck in the ground. The door opened. At the same time, The door of the office opposite also opened. 2 narcotics squad officers walked out. When they saw Captain Deng, they said in unison, "Boss, she went up to the 2nd floor." Captain Deng looked up and nodded slightly. "Yes, she went up. Let's go and take a look." Chapter 46-61. The white light reflected in Captain Deng's eyes, like a blazing fire illuminating the deep darkness in his eyes. Captain Deng, who had walked to the abyss for a long time, finally saw hope. The 2 anti-narcotics policemen quickly exchanged glances. So there was hope. "You two, why are your clothes and hats crooked? Go, look in the mirror and tidy yourself up." Captain Deng reminded his subordinates to pay attention to their image. He buttoned the top button of his police uniform and pulled the hem of his clothes. Just as he was wondering if he had missed something, his subordinate ran out from behind and handed him his police cap. Cap is not on." Yes, he had missed his police cap. After putting on his hat, Captain Deng strode up the stairs and climbed up several steps in just a few steps. Boss! Several anti-narcotics policemen stood in the stairwell. When they saw their captain coming over, they suppressed their excitement and raised their voices to greet him. Yi Qian stood on the 2nd floor and looked down at the sound in the corridor. He saw Captain Deng of the anti-narcotics team striding over. Yi Qian hurried down the stairs. No. Captain Deng stopped him immediately and said in a mellow voice, "The meeting room is on the 2nd floor. You don't have to come down." Taking down the 6 narcotics police officers he sent out in 15 minutes was twice as fast as what he had expected and 10 minutes faster than Yen, who had the best record. Captain Deng suppressed the excitement deep in his eyes and walked up to Yi Jian in a few steps. The first thing he did was to apologize. "I'm sorry for not informing you in advance when I arranged this tonight. There's a reason for it, please forgive me." Yi Qian smiled and said, "Captain Deng, you're too polite. You're responsible for me, so you don't have to apologize. I can understand." That's good. This way, please." He was straightforward and did not need to explain too much before he was forgiven. The heavy stone in Captain Deng's heart was lifted a lot. He hoped that she could persevere until the end and pass all the tests. Although he had hope in his heart was a little heavy. The road ahead was full of danger. If she could really pass all the tests and successfully sneak into the core of the Golden Triangle, would she be able to complete the mission and come back smoothly? Captain Deng, who was in a complicated mood, looked a little gloomy. His footsteps, which were light just now, were heavy when he took another step. The door to the meeting room was pushed open. Yi Qian shook hands with the narcotics officers whom he had fought with before sitting down to begin the meeting. Captain Deng of the Narcotics Division, who had a thin face and a pair of eagle-like eyes, first told Yi Qian what he was going to face, where he would go, and what he needed to do in advance. He spoke very slowly, as if he was afraid that Yi Qian would not be able to hear him clearly. He spoke word by word very clearly, and from time to time, he would ask Yi Qian, "Any questions? Is there anything you don't understand? Is there anything you need to ask?" Every time Yi Qian answered, "Yes, no problem, please continue," Captain Deng's eyes would flash with a hint of a smile, and the hope in the depths of his eyes would brighten a little. This was the 8th female soldier in the system they were looking for. The previous 7 people were both female police officers and female soldiers, and all of them were very outstanding. However, in the end, none of them passed the test on their side. However, this military cadet with the surname Yi was able to memorize the information they provided in a limited time. Then, she would enter the last round of the disguise test. If she passed the disguise test, she would be the undercover agent who would enter the core of the Golden Triangle. She would be abducted by drug dealers who pretended to be looking for workers. After being abducted, she would face the danger of being lured into taking goods, the danger of being beaten up, the danger of being illegally imprisoned, and even the danger of being humiliated by the drug dealers. Chapter 46-62. She had too much responsibility on her shoulders. Not only did she have to face many dangers alone, she also had to investigate the whereabouts of the missing girls. She had to report to the outside world about the new drug chain, the people involved in the transaction, the time of the transaction. Everything had to be reported to the outside world. Only by reporting to the outside world could the anti-narcotics police quickly eliminate this drug chain that controlled the girls' drug trafficking. It was so big that she had to fight alone the entire time. Once her identity was exposed, she had to think of a way to escape on her own. As for whether she had backup, she needed to see if there were any spies sent to investigate the place she entered. Captain Deng listed out almost all of the dangers Yi Qian would face one by one. He also showed many hair-raising, tragic photos of drug dealers who had committed crimes against their conscience. He wanted to see if Yi Qian's reaction would be fear or calm. From the beginning to the end of the last tragic photo, Captain Deng did not see a trace of fear on the cadet sitting across from him. Other than her expression being serious, there was no other change. There was no fear, no panic, not even a frown. He could not tell what she was thinking. "Little Yi, do you have any questions? If not, we need to hurry to the next step." After cutting the last tragic photo from the projection screen, Captain Deng stared unblinkingly at the cadet he could not see through. Even his voice became softer, as if afraid of disturbing Yi Qian. Yi Qian looked away. She nodded without a change in her expression and said seriously, "No questions. Please proceed to the next step." "Are you sure there are no questions? These photos—" Suddenly, Captain Deng raised his hand. The originally blank projection screen showed the most tragic photo that had not been shown before. In the photo, the drug dealer had thrown a person into a water cage. Only the person's head was above water, and underwater snakes, leeches, and piranhas were disturbed by the electric waves and swarmed up to bite the person's head. What was even more shocking was that the photographer had purposely captured the executioner's facial expression. The tormented executioner's face showed the despair before death. Yi Qian glanced at it and looked away. She had seen even more tragic photos in the Snowfield Brigade, and she had personally experienced even more tragic scenes. Therefore, Yi Qian said calmly, "Please continue. These photos can't affect me." That photo. Even Zhou Nianyan, who had the strongest mental fortitude, was so shocked that he gasped. The 9 narcotics squad officers looked at Yi Qian in unison, then looked at their boss. Their eyes shone with a dark light that pierced through the darkness. "Boss, there's hope. Hold on tight." Captain Deng kept staring at Yi Qian until he gently closed his eyes and placed his left hand on a stack of documents that was about half an adult's arm high. "This is all the information, photos, code words, the entire topographic map of the Golden Triangle, and the photos of the villages sent back by satellite. You only have 3 hours. You need to remember all the information in 3 hours. After 3 hours, we'll ask questions and you'll answer them. The 9 of them will stay. If you have any questions, you can immediately ask any of them." That night, Yi Qian sat in a meeting room in Cheli City. He was accompanied by 9 experienced narcotics squad officers to learn the code words of the drug chain trade. At the same time, he had to write down a large number of suspicious people and immediately identify the people in the photos. All of this required a strong memory to memorize in a short period of time. Chapter 46-63. Yi Qian was far away in Cheli City, Yun Province. When Xia Jinyuan returned from a mission, he learned that his girlfriend had been sent to Yun Province by Major General Yang to carry out a mission. Xia Jinyuan, with bloodshot eyes, sat in Major General Yang's office in casual clothes, waiting for him to come back. His mission this time was to work together with the Russian Signal Flag Special Forces. The person he was working with was none other than Luke, who had worked together to eliminate Cobra. The two of them once again worked together to blow up an underground nuclear bomb in a certain western country. After the explosion, the two of them immediately left and went back to their respective homes to find their mothers. The first thing Xia Jinyuan did after returning to the country was not to return to the army. He had obtained some information and needed to submit it to the military headquarters. The military headquarters would then transfer it to the relevant research department to see if they could extract any useful information from the information. Major General Yang was having a video conference with an armored regiment in the army. When he learned that Xia Jinyuan, who was supposed to return to the base, was waiting for him in the office, he immediately knew that his favorite subordinate must have something important to report to him in person. The conference started at 1:30 p.m. and ended at 4:00 p.m. Major General Yang tidied up the documents on the table, hurriedly greeted the generals who attended the conference with him, and hurried to the office. Xia Jinyuan, who arrived at the military headquarters around 2:00 p.m., was too tired. While waiting, he simply collapsed on the sofa in the office and slept until Major General Yang's conference ended. The door lock was turned, and the young soldier sleeping on the sofa opened his eyes. There was a clear coldness in his eyes. When he got up, the coldness disappeared into the depths of his eyes. "You fell asleep?" Major General Yang pushed the door open and saw Xia Jinyuan's bloodshot eyes. He walked in with a smile. "Do you want to continue sleeping? I happen to have a few documents to deal with." He was not joking. He was indeed suggesting that Xia Jinyuan sleep a little longer. Every time they went abroad for a high-risk mission, they would be alert 24 hours a day, and would not allow themselves to sleep easily. Xia Jinyuan's mission this time was quite special, so it was even more impossible for him to have a good rest. Xia Jinyuan, who had just sat up, stood up again and poured himself a cup of cold water. The cold water flowed down his throat and his brain became much clearer. "I've slept for 2 hours. It's about time." His voice was a little hoarse as he replied, "I don't have much to do. I got some information from the underground database. It's all related to the bomb. I took it out to see if it's useful to our country. You have to know that some developed countries in the West have military reserves that are far more powerful than China's, and the same goes for their weapons. Otherwise, how can they be called developed countries, and our country is still developing China?" Major General Yang's face turned solemn when he heard this. "Is there a problem?" "No." He took off his jacket and tore it open. All the information he had retrieved from the underground vault was stored in a small chip. "Let's hand it over to the relevant department. It should be useful." Major General Yang took the chip and nodded solemnly. "Okay, thank you for your hard work. It's a little hard, but since you've agreed to my request, it doesn't matter if it's a little hard." Xia Jinyuan, who was yawning without caring about his image, happened to see the stiffness on Major General Yang's face. He only yawned halfway and swallowed the other half of his yawn. "Your expression tells me that the thing I need you to do has failed?" It was not a question. Although it was a question, it was a complete affirmation. Chapter 46-64. Facing his subordinate's cold gaze, Major General Yang sat down and opened the thermos flask on the table. He took a sip of warm water to calm himself down and then said, "I'm not Huang. I also want Xiaoye to spend the winter vacation at home this year, but I need her for a mission." "What mission?" Xia Jinyuan frowned and his handsome face darkened. He had never made any requests to the military. This time, he hoped that his little fox could accompany old Master Fu during the last winter break before she joined the Shuiyu Brigade. Major General Yang agreed before he left, but now he was told that little fox had gone on a mission. His hoarse voice was like a thick layer of ice sliding across the floor, bringing with it waves of coldness. "What mission needs her? Our team's mission? This is confidential. You have no right to know. Also, Xiao Yi is not an official member of the Snowfield Brigade, so you have no right to know where she is going." "Okay, I'll hand the chip over to the relevant department. You look tired, go back and rest. I still have things to deal with, if you don't. Major General Yang pulled open the drawer, took out his car key, and threw it on the table. The car key is mine. Help yourself. He was in a hurry to send Xia Jinyuan away. There was no other way. How could he not know about the boy with a family Xia and the soldier under him? If he continued to ask, he might not even be able to win against a soldier. Xia Jinyuan, who did not immediately go to get the car keys, put his hands on the side of the desk and leaned his tall body slowly towards Major General Yang. He looked at his old leader with his thin and sharp eyes. His dark eyes made Major General Yang's heart tremble with fear. Voila! The car key was dragged across the desk, and Major General Yang's eyelids twitched. Before Major General Yang could say rude, the young man who was staring at him curled his lips, picked up the car key, and left with a faint smile on his face. Major General Yang did not tell him the details of the mission, so Xia Jinyuan had no right to ask. Major General Yang also said that Yi Qian was not an official member of the Snowfield Brigade, so he had no right to know where she was going. He was not wrong. Therefore, Xia Jinyuan, who was engraved in his bones that a soldier's duty is to obey orders, didn't continue to ask even though Major General Yang's words choked him to the point that he almost vomited blood. He was still not her captain? After this year, next June, he would not only be her captain, but also her man. Xia Jinyuan, who had not slept during the mission, directly drove Major General Yang's car to his apartment in Beijing to get some sleep. As for where his little fox went, he would know. When the Special Forces of the Snowfield Brigade went out on a high-intensity mission, if there were no more urgent missions or important matters to deal with after returning, they would usually take about 3 days off to rest. This was to ensure that the soldiers returned to their normal state and reached a balance between tension and relaxation. Xia Jinyuan was indeed very tired. He collapsed on the bed that he had not slept in for a long time. Within 3 minutes, the young soldier with dark circles under his eyes fell into a deep sleep. Yi Qian, who was far away in Yun Province, had already completed the last disguise test. She had encountered 3 rounds of anti-narcotics police at the bus station in Cheli City, but no one had recognized her as a military school student. No one had investigated a girl who was dressed casually, spoke softly, and even had a clean temperament. Chapter 46-65. The car passed through the checkpoint and slowly drove out of Sherry City towards the border between the two countries. After about 500 meters, Yi Qian asked the driver to stop. She said that she had left her passport at the hotel and needed to go get it. The driver used the excuse that the car wasn't waiting for her and sped off. Yi Qian slowly walked towards the checkpoint. On the other side, Captain Deng's face was dark as he stared coldly at the 2 narcotics officers who just got on the car to check. He stared until the 2 narcotics officers' legs trembled. Just now, did you confirm that there were no suspicious people or items in the car? After 3 consecutive rounds of narcotics officers couldn't find the military school student who was disguised and hiding drugs in the car, Captain Deng's face couldn't be any better. Today, Captain Deng seriously suspected that his subordinates weren't doing their jobs properly. Or rather, they just saw that the girl was pretty and casually let her go. Yi Qian didn't stop when she walked past the checkpoint. She only glanced at Captain Deng, who was scolding people. Her footsteps were a bit hurried, but her expression was very calm as she walked past the checkpoint. It was definitely not convenient for her to have any communication with Captain Deng outside. She kept walking for another 500 meters until she reached an egg-shaped cake spot designated by Captain Deng. She ate the cake while waiting for Captain Deng and the others to come over. The 2 narcotics officers who got on the car and didn't find anything suspicious were scolded by their boss until they couldn't even lift their head. They really didn't notice that there was a pretty girl in the car. They also looked carefully, but didn't find anything suspicious. They also checked the luggage that they thought was suspicious. The narcotics dogs also didn't find anything wrong. How could their boss be so sure that there was a suspicious person in the car? Boss, you can't just keep scolding like this. Let's chase after the car and check again to find the suspicious person. Beside him, the squad leader at the checkpoint reminded him in a low voice. He really thought so. Since they knew that there was a suspicious person in the car, what was the point of scolding them? They would definitely run over to find the person first, and then come back to punish them. Captain Deng snorted heavily. What's the point of chasing? They already got off the car. His cold gaze swept over the several anti-narcotics police officers standing in front of him, and he said word by word, "This is the last border inspection station that belongs to us, the anti-narcotics police, before the domestic drug traffickers leave our country. Today, you're giving them a chance to bring drugs back to our country next time. All of you must check carefully. Don't let any suspicious person go, and don't just let them go. Do you hear me?" "Yes." Several narcotics officers straightened their backs and accepted their captain's criticism. They were the last line of defense for the country, and it was their job to not let any suspicious targets go. Captain Deng didn't say anything more. He glanced in the direction of the cake shop and turned to his subordinate who had been reprimanded by him. There was a comrade in disguise who left the car just now. She had suspicious items on her, but none of you noticed her and none of you suspected her identity. Our reconnaissance ability still needs to be strengthened. They weren't the only ones who didn't see through Yi Qian's disguise. Captain Deng didn't feel good when he thought about how none of them saw through his disguise. He was both happy and worried, half happy and half sad. They were happy because there was finally a female soldier who passed all their assessments. They finally found the most suitable undercover to enter the core area of the Golden Triangle. They were worried because 3 waves of anti-narcotics police did not find anything suspicious about her. Were there more suspicious people with strong psychological qualities who escaped under their noses? Chapter 46-66. Because of Yi Qian's successful disguise, the anti-narcotics police in Cherry City had to strengthen their assessment and training. It was much more difficult than before. Of course, their skills had also improved by leaps and bounds. As a result, drug traffickers no longer dared to transport drugs through Cherry City. Captain Deng saw Yi Jian in the cake shop. With mixed feelings, he looked at the cadet who was leisurely eating the sweet pastries one bite at a time. Suppressing his mixed feelings, he walked in. When the shop assistant saw this, he narrowed his eyes and nodded at their boss as a form of greeting. The cake shop was a secret spot for the anti-narcotics police in Cherry City. If the informants had any information, they would first pass it to the anti-narcotics police through the cake shop. This ensured the informant's safety and allowed the anti-narcotics police to gather information as quickly as possible. You're very good. You managed to disguise yourself under 3 waves of anti-narcotics police. Captain Deng sat down and spoke slowly. There was admiration in his eyes. Little Yi, you passed our assessment. Tonight we will send you to a place. Whether you can be targeted by the drug traffickers or not is up to you. We will wait for your good news outside. Yi Qian put down his spoon and wiped the corners of his mouth with a tissue. He smiled and said, "Captain Deng, wait for my good news." "Yes, I think we will definitely wait for your good news. After all, you are much more outstanding than the previous few." To be honest, a female special police officer came from the capital the day before yesterday. She is already the most outstanding female police officer I have ever seen, but she failed the disguise assessment. So before you came, I didn't have any hope. I even almost refused to let you come. Captain Deng spoke in a low voice. There was a hint of a smile in his voice. He seemed to be comforting himself and Yi Qian. "Let's go. We need to go back to the team and prepare. We can only send you off tonight." He stood up and left without waiting for Yi Qian. He was afraid that if he chatted with her for a while longer, he would make the decision not to let her go. Yi Qian looked at the back of the man who left quickly and was slightly stunned. Then, she seemed to realize what was going on and smiled slightly. Captain Deng was a rather soft-hearted narcotics squad leader. When they reached the brigade, Yi Qian walked through the same corridor as last night. After turning a corner, she suddenly stopped in her tracks. She looked at the woman walking towards her with a look of surprise in her eyes. Anniversary year. She actually bumped into Annihilation, whom she had not seen for a long time. Could it be? His eyes widened slightly. Yi Qian looked at Captain Deng, who was standing beside him, and then at Zhou Nianyan, who also stopped in her tracks. Could it be that the female SWAT officer from Beijing that Captain Deng mentioned was Zhou Nianyan? You know each other? How could Captain Deng not see through it? Seeing that something was wrong, he directly asked the main point. Yes, an acquaintance. Yi Qian nodded. The surprise in his eyes had already turned into a smile. She's indeed a very powerful female Special Forces officer. She's very good at fighting. Captain Deng, who had received confirmation, also laughed. Birds of a feather flock together. Both of you are amazing. We admire you. Annihilation, who had recognized Yi Qian, blinked a few times and then quickly walked over. So the more powerful female soldier they mentioned was Yi Qian. Ha 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 ha. Yi Qian was indeed more powerful than her. It was normal for her to lose to Yi Qian. Yi Qian also quickly walked towards her. The two girls, who had only met once, inexplicably hit it off very well, reunited in a distant border city. Even though they had not seen each other for more than a year, they could still recognize each other immediately and could even say each other's names. Chapter 46-67. Captain Deng and his colleagues didn't expect that the two girls, whom they had high hopes for, to know each other. They gave up on one and chose the other, which made Captain Deng and his colleagues feel a little awkward. Fortunately, Zhou Nianyan and Yi Jian were the kind of people with big hearts. They did not notice the awkwardness of Captain Deng at all. The two of them first gave each other a warm hug. There was no feeling of unfamiliarity at all. They were very excited, as if they were old friends who had reunited for many years. Yi Qian left Cherry City that night. Even though she had passed all the tests of the narcotics squad, Captain Deng was still worried. He was afraid that Yi Qian would have some psychological burden. Seeing that the two girls were close, he asked them to go to a corner and have a private talk. He smiled at Nian and said, Xiao Zhou, keep Xiao Yi company. She arrived in Yun province yesterday and hasn't rested since. Keep her company and let her sleep if necessary. It was already 5 o'clock in the evening the next day. It was time to rest, but Xiao Yi, who passed the test, didn't look tired at all. She was so energetic that Captain Deng wondered if he was getting old and didn't have as much energy as before. After staying up for a day and a night, he wanted to go back to the office and lie down. Nian held Yi Qian's arm and smiled sweetly. Captain Deng, don't worry. Leave it to me. I will keep her company and let her sleep well. Yi Qian looked at the bruises on his face that hadn't gone away, especially the bruise on his left cheek that was swollen again. It looked like he was disfigured. Nian's heart ached. Nian wasn't as lucky as Yi Qian. Even though she passed the combat test, she was still bruised and swollen. She couldn't even speak clearly the day before yesterday. The corner of her mouth was so swollen that it looked like she had a date in her mouth. After resting for a few days, she finally dared to show her face today. Previously, her face was so swollen that she was too embarrassed to show her face. The narcotics squad members who participated in the test saw that she was still a pretty girl. They felt very sorry for her and took turns to take care of her to lessen the guilt in their hearts. They had no choice. They had to beat her up, but if they beat her up, they felt sorry for the policewoman who came all the way here to support them. Nian, who was lying on the bed, smiled and said, Don't be fooled by their fierce looks. They're actually quite cute. When they saw that I was beaten to a pulp, they all lined up to apologize to me. Then, Captain Deng appeared and scolded everyone he saw. Tisk, Captain Deng is really protective. I've already been beaten up like this by them, and he still wants to strike first to gain the upper hand. He's afraid that I'll make things difficult for his people. I won't expose them. How can you blame them for this? Who would dare to joke about a matter of life and death? Even if they were to play tricks, I wouldn't be happy about it. I was sent here to support the team. I'm not here to sightsee. I only have one life. How can I treat it casually? Unyielding was a chatterbox. Although she was good at fighting, she was the only female officer in the team who followed the male SWAT officers on city missions. Therefore, she was quite favored in the team. His situation was similar to that of Yi Qian. He was loved by everyone. She was cheerful, eloquent, intelligent, and extremely likable. Who wouldn't like such a girl? Yi Qian liked her very much. Yesterday afternoon, I applied for another try. The man who brought me food stuttered and told me that the military had sent a female soldier over. If I'm not wrong, it should be her. But I didn't expect it to be you. At that time, I felt a little regretful and wanted to try again. Now that I've seen you, I've completely given up. Compared to you, I'm no match for you. Unyielding spoke softly. Yi Qian, who was lying on the same bed, closed his eyes and listened quietly. Chapter 46-68. Unyielding's voice was different from Yi Qian's. Yi Qian's voice was clear yet contained a hint of self-restraint. It made people feel that she was a cold girl when they first met her. Unyielding was different. Her voice was like a bell, cool and refreshing like the autumn wind that could blow away the dry autumn wind. It was very comfortable to listen to. Yi Qian didn't dislike her for talking too much at all. Instead, he hoped that she would talk more so that people who listened to her would feel more comfortable. Yi Qian liked listening to her voice. It had a kind of carefree quality that made people happy. It was a quality that only a child who grew up in a happy family would have. It made people around her involuntarily want to get close to her. If Big Brother had a girl like her by his side, his days would definitely not be as cold as the lonely moon. The reason why Grandpa liked Unyielding at first sight and told her that he hoped that Unyielding would become his granddaughter-in-law was probably what she thought. He hoped that Unyielding's happiness would rub off on Big Brother. But how could two people who had no contact with each other get along and live the rest of their lives hand in hand? Yi Qian, who was listening quietly, kept thinking. Although she felt that Unyielding and Big Brother Li Jinyan were a good match, she didn't want to be unreasonable just because she liked him. If the two of them could be together, everyone would be happy. If they couldn't, then it could only be said that the two of them were not meant to be. The other half of their lives didn't belong to each other. She would find a day to ask Big Brother's opinion first, then ask Unyielding. She had to know if the two of them had any impression of each other. They should have. After all, Unyielding was the first policewoman to treat Big Brother as a suspicious person and to search his body forcefully. They had such a big misunderstanding, so it was impossible for them not to have any impression of each other. She kept thinking about it in a daze. She didn't even pay attention to Zhou Yanyan's question. It was only when Unyielding touched her that she came back to her senses. "Do you want to sleep? Why don't you sleep for a while?" Unyielding, who was not sleepy, saw that Yi Qian had not answered him for a long time. After touching Yi Qian, he regretted that he had disturbed Yi Qian's sleep. "Go to sleep. I'm afraid you'll have to leave at night." She had also gone through the test and had failed in the disguise test. As such, Unyielding knew very well where Yi Qian would go next and what kind of danger Yi Qian would face. That was why she asked if Yi Qian was afraid. Yi Qian, who hadn't heard her question clearly, opened her eyes. She turned her head to look at Unyielding, who was also lying flat. She said apologetically, I'm sorry, I was thinking about something. I didn't want to sleep. What did you ask me? Still don't want to sleep? Nian also turned his head, and then turned his body sideways to face Yi Qian. The two of them looked at each other at such a close distance, and there was not a trace of awkwardness. Don't lie to me. Captain Deng told me to sleep with you. Yi Qian laughed. I'm not lying to you. I'm not sleepy at the moment. Ask me and I'll sleep after I answer. That's fine too. Nian's lips curved into a smile. Her delicate eyes were bright and clear as she looked at Yi Qian. The smile at the corners of her mouth slowly disappeared. Yi Qian, are you afraid? Going to a place like that, you might stay there for the rest of your life. Are you afraid? When she asked, her expression was particularly serious. There was deep worry in her eyes. It was the worry of not wanting to see her good friend in danger. Her seriousness made Yi Qian unable to answer immediately. After deliberating for a while, Yi Qian answered in a low voice, If I say I'm not afraid, you won't believe me. Afraid? Why wouldn't I be afraid? I'm afraid that's the most normal reaction for a person. I'm no exception. Chapter 46-69. Zhou Ninian, who had been waiting for an answer, suddenly stood up and said anxiously, Then you, Yi Qian, didn't let her continue. He raised his hand and patted her shoulder. Don't be agitated. Lie down and listen to me. Yi Qian's words stirred up Nian. She had a lot to say, but she obediently lay down and listened to Yi Qian. What's the use of being afraid? If you're afraid, you won't come. If you come, you won't be afraid. Nian, do you see the Wall of Martyrs? The Wall of Martyrs. Nian's pupils constricted slightly, then she slowly nodded. She saw it. The moment she saw it, she couldn't move her feet. Those black and white photos were the most powerful resistance against the darkness. Countless seniors sacrificed their lives to fight against the darkness, to resist the invasion of darkness. Even if they died, they would fight forever, and their spirit of never giving in was passed down. With a legacy, there would be a legacy. The surviving narcotics squad was the legacy of the deceased seniors. This is a long and endless journey with no end in sight. You and I are the same as them. When we set foot on this path, we are destined to fight bravely, and there is no turning back. I'm also afraid. I'm afraid of falling behind in the journey. I'm afraid of losing the opportunity to fight side by side with my comrades. I'm afraid of disappearing completely before I can even begin to overcome the obstacles. Nian, I have to be afraid. Only when I'm afraid will I know how precious my life is. Only when I'm afraid will I know that I have to come back alive. I don't want to fall behind midway. I don't want to be left behind one day with just a photo to tell the story of my journey. I want to keep going until I can no longer carry a gun, until I can no longer fight, until I reach the end of my life. His hand was held by another hand that wasn't soft, but had the same strength. Yi Qian held the hand that held his. Two hands that were 2 sizes smaller than a man's were held tightly. The fingers were slender, but they contained a strength that many men couldn't resist. Nian understood Yi Qian's words. Yes, she was afraid in the face of danger, but as Yi Qian said, she was more afraid of falling behind midway and not being able to overcome obstacles with her comrades and face the darkness that would destroy the peace of society together. She would always remember the same oath on the first day she entered the police academy, and the first day she was assigned to the SWAT team. I swear to become a police officer of China, to devote myself to the noble cause of the people's public security, to be loyal to the party, to serve the people, to enforce the law, and to be disciplined, to be a builder and defender of China's socialist with Chinese characteristics as his work. To maintain the stability of society, promote justice, and ensure the people's work. Hers. Her. And her. The journey was her. Under the slightly thicker quilt, two slender hands held each other tightly. They had a common language, a common goal, and a common goal. That was why they could lie on the same bed without any sense of distance even after meeting for the second time. Yi Qian smiled as he looked at the solemn girl. His clear voice was terrifyingly calm. Being afraid isn't a bad thing. On the contrary, it's a good thing. Think about it. Because we're afraid, we won't go astray. We won't lose ourselves or our direction. Chapter 46-70. Nian Nian's blood rushed to her chest, and her eyes sparkled like the morning star in the sky. This is the first time I've heard such an explanation for fear. There's no contradiction at all. Because you're so right. Sometimes, fear is a good thing. It won't lead us astray, and we won't lose ourselves or our direction. That's why we're so determined. She spoke in a low voice. She had already gained a deep understanding from Yi Qian's words. After saying the most important thing, Yi Qian relaxed his breathing and slowly closed his eyes. His voice gradually softened. To me, fear isn't a big deal. It's like finding a powerful whetstone in the face of danger. It's a cornerstone that trains us to become stronger day by day. We can't lose our cornerstone. With it, our foundation will be more stable. There's nothing to be afraid of. The ones who are truly afraid are those who can't see the sun and can only walk in the dark. After saying so much, she really did seem a little tired and sleepy. What defeats us often isn't external factors. What defeats us is our lack of confidence and fear. If you want to win, you have to use tenacious willpower and strong ego to defeat your lack of confidence and fear. I want to sleep. Nian Nian, I want to sleep. I'm very happy chatting with you. It makes me feel very relaxed. I'll sleep first. Good night. The sky outside had already darkened. Although Yun Province's winter was warmer than the mainland, it was still winter. The sun was always longer than the other 3 seasons, and the temperature was also much lower. Lying in the warm bed and chatting with like-minded friends, the time was so beautiful that it was isolated from the outside world. It was the most relaxing moment of peace. The girl beside her breathed slowly, and Nian Nian gradually closed her eyes. She didn't feel sleepy. She just wanted to sleep with her. She and her were walking on a path with no end. It was a path full of thorns that could only be cut open with the weapons in her hands. She and her had never thought of turning back. They only wanted to continue walking. Even if they died early, they would have no regret. The room with no lights turned darker. Nian Nian, who had been quietly thinking, fell asleep as well. There was an anti-narcotics policeman outside the door. He raised his hand to knock on the door and send in the food, but was stopped by Captain Deng, who waved his hand to tell him not to worry about the girls who went in and never came out. Let them chat and sleep for a while. In a few hours it would be time for them to separate. Time ticked by, and the sky was getting darker and darker. The clock pointed to 8 o'clock sharp, and the preset alarm rang. The man on the bed stretched out his well-defined, masculine arm from the quilt to turn off the alarm. He then got up from the bed, took off his slippers, and walked to the bathroom. From washing up to changing clothes, Xia Jinyuan followed the habits he had developed in the army. Within 3 minutes, he was done. He was already standing by the shoe cabinet at the entrance and changing his shoes. He had to go out and find something to eat. He was hungry. Wearing a medium-length coat, he changed into a pair of casual black leather shoes. The man who rarely wore casual clothes walked out. He was tall and handsome. As soon as he entered the elevator, the young women in the same room couldn't control their gazes and kept glancing at him. He had a good figure, was tall, and had a handsome face. Wearing a medium-length coat that was very tailored, but it made him look very masculine and elegant. He was like a walking luminous body. Who else could she look at but him? Chapter 46-71. Xia Jinyuan rarely wore casual clothes. Whenever he went out, he would attract a lot of attention, regardless of whether he was a man or a woman. When the elevator reached the 6th floor, 2 more young girls came in. Xia Jinyuan, who was expressionless, pursed his lips slightly. He felt that the 4 girls in the elevator were constantly looking at him like X-rays. When did so many young girls move into the most expensive bachelor apartment in Beijing? Was it because it was close to the university? In just one elevator ride, Comrade Xia Jinyuan planned to sell the bachelor apartment. The 2 girls standing at the innermost corner were pushing each other. Just as the 2 girls from the 6th floor were about to take action after exchanging glances, one of the girls bit her lower lip and walked to Xia Jinyuan's side from the back. She showed her most beautiful smile and started to strike up a conversation with him. "Handsome, can I introduce myself?" Xia Jinyuan took a step back. His expression was cold and arrogant. He glanced coldly at the young girl whose face was covered with countless layers of makeup. His thin lips moved slightly. "Not interested." The other 2 girls didn't give him any face and laughed out loud. Wasn't it funny? She was afraid that they would strike up a conversation, so she rushed in first. And the result? It was so embarrassing. The girl who tried to strike up a conversation didn't expect to be so humiliated. Her face turned green and white. When she heard that someone was laughing at her, she glared at the guy who didn't give her face, and then glared at the 2 girls who were laughing at her. Although her friend was also embarrassed, she was afraid that there would be an even more embarrassing scene. She quickly pulled away her friend who was about to lose her temper. The girl who threw a tantrum snorted coldly. "You're not a gentleman at all. What's the use of being handsome?" When the elevator reached the 1st floor, Xia Jinyuan walked out as if he didn't hear anything. Did he need to be a gentleman when dealing with people who had obvious intentions? What Xia Jinyuan didn't expect was that he could reject being hit on in the elevator, but when faced with Ms. Xiao, it was too late to turn around and avoid her. Ms. Xiao, who was holding a thermos flask in her hand, also saw Xia Jinyuan. She was pleasantly surprised, as if she couldn't believe that she would meet her only son here. "Yuan." Mrs. Xiao, who was walking over in her high heels, had a look of disbelief on her face. She was originally walking slowly, but now she was walking quickly. She was surprised and happy, and all her emotions were piled up on her face. Compared to the surprise on her face, Xia Jinyuan appeared particularly calm. "Hello." He was very calm, polite, and distant. Madame Zhao's expression darkened as she approached quickly. Even the smile on her face became forced. "Do you live here?" she asked cautiously. She wanted to keep Xia Jinyuan to talk to her a little longer, but she was also afraid that her only son would not give her face and leave. She hadn't seen her son for a long time. She didn't even have any news about him. When she contacted Shirley, there was only one answer. Her son was busy and didn't have time to come out. Just like a long time ago, her husband was always very, very busy. He couldn't come home, and he was so busy that he rarely sent her letters or called her. "Are you busy now? Can you accompany your mother?" Mrs. Xiao, who did not get a reply, asked very softly and timidly, "I haven't seen you for a long time. I want to sit with you for a while, okay?" This time, they bumped into each other accidentally. But what about the next time? Wouldn't it be a year or 2 before they could meet again? Chapter 46-72. Madame Xiao looked at her son, who was already a head taller than her. His face was handsome, and he was as tall as a mountain. In her life, the person she owed the most was her only son. When she wanted to make it up to him, she suddenly realized that the son she had abandoned no longer needed her care or motherly love. But she still couldn't help but care about him. She wanted to make up for her past mistakes as much as possible. "Yuan." Madame Xiao, who had tears in her eyes, opened her mouth once more with pleading eyes. Xia Jinyuan looked at the time and then looked at Madame Xiao, who was about to cry. He frowned slightly and finally said, "I'm going out to eat now. Half an hour." Okay, half an hour is fine. Half an hour is fine. Mom knows a good restaurant outside. The environment is very clean and the dishes are not bad. Let's eat there." She was afraid that Xia Jinyuan would find it troublesome, so she immediately explained, "It's really not far. It's only a 5-minute walk. Mom is a regular there, so I can ask them to serve the dishes in advance. It won't take up too much of your time." Xia Jinyuan's agreement made Madame Xiao so happy that tears flowed out of her eyes. This was her son, the only thing she cared about for the rest of her life. She had done so many wrong things when she was young, and now she just wanted to make up for it. He used to ignore her, but now he agreed to eat with her. Did this mean that her son was gradually accepting her care? Madame Xiao raised her head and wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes. She had no other wish now except to be forgiven by her son as soon as possible. The restaurant was indeed not far away. Before Xia Jinyuan sat down, Madame Xiao had already started ordering. After ordering 4 or 5 dishes in a row, Xia Jinyuan lightly tapped the table with his slender fingers and said, "We don't need that much. Hurry up. These dishes are all the restaurant's signature dishes. They're delicious. You can try them all. It's okay if you can't finish them. They're all." Madame Xiao. Before she could finish, Xia Jinyuan unhurriedly interrupted her. "I don't have much time. Thank you." His voice was very cold, like a basin of cold water being poured directly on Madame Xiao. Madame Xiao's expression stiffened and finally became gloomy. "Okay, just 5 dishes. I won't order any more." Closing the menu, Madame Xiao asked the service staff to serve her dishes as soon as possible. Her excited mood gradually calmed down. After sitting down, Madame Xiao looked at the thermos she had just put on the table, and a gentle and solemn smile reappeared on her face. "Would you like to try the soup Mom made first? It's still warm. Try it first to fill your stomach." As she spoke, she opened the thermos flask and the chicken soup with the smell of Chinese medicine wafted out. Xia Jinyuan glanced at it disinterestedly and said, "No, I don't have the habit of drinking soup. You can keep it for yourself." It was a very straightforward rejection. Mrs. Zhao's movements stiffened, and she silently tightened the thermos lid again. The chicken soup with angelica and motherwort was not suitable for her son. Just as she was about to say something, the phone in her handbag rang. Ms. Xiao said softly, "I'll take this call." She lowered her head and silently wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes. She had thought that this meal was a meeting to mend the relationship between mother and son. Who would have known that she had thought too much? She had thought too much. Mrs. Xiao took out her phone from her bag and saw the caller ID. She quickly glanced at Xia Jinyuan and hesitated to answer the call. Chapter 46-73. Can't answer? Then I'll go out first. Xia Jinyuan, who was sitting 3 empty chairs away, stood up. Ms. Xiao panicked and said, No, I'll answer it now. I'll answer it now." She picked up the phone in a hurry and heard a girl's voice. "Auntie Xiao, why aren't you here yet? Are you lost? I'm coming to pick you up now." "Jiai, Auntie Xiao has something urgent to do. Don't wait for Auntie Xiao." It was Du Jiai, who had just returned to Beijing. She couldn't stand Mrs. Li's nagging, and moved back to the single apartment she bought during her university days. A few days ago, she came back to China and stayed at the Du family's house for 2 nights. Then, she was annoyed by Mrs. Li's nagging and ran away with the excuse of work. The soup that Ms. Xiao wanted to serve to Xia Jinyuan was actually for Du Jiai. The Angelica black chicken soup was good for nourishing blood during menstruation, so it was not suitable for Xia Jinyuan. The private room was very quiet, and the voice on the other side of the phone could be heard faintly. Xia Jinyuan curled his lips slightly, and a trace of sarcasm flashed in his eyes. Miss Xiao was still kind and considerate as usual, but of course that was only for others. Jai, be good. Auntie Xiao will come to see you later. What do you want to eat? I'll make it for you. If you're not feeling well, lie down on the bed. Don't force yourself to work. No matter how busy you are, you have to take good care of yourself. Du Jiai, who didn't get the black chicken soup, threw a tantrum and said sweetly, Okay, Auntie Xiao, I forgive you. When you're done, remember to call me. I'll come to pick you up. If it's too late, don't come. I'll be worried. Okay, I got it. Auntie Xiao, I'll hang up first. Ms. Xiao said gently. Those who didn't know better would think that the person on the other side of the phone was her biological daughter. Although she wasn't her biological daughter, she wasn't far off. Especially in the past 2 years, she took care of Du Jiai more than Mrs. Li, who was her biological mother. Xia Jinyuan was very calm. He always knew that Ms. Xiao cared about others the most, but he didn't care about his family. In the past, he would feel sad and resentful, but now, he didn't feel anything. They were just strangers. He didn't need to care about them. After ending the call, Madame Xiao put down her phone and explained apologetically, I'm sorry, Yuan. Jai isn't feeling well, and I'm worried about her. Xia Jinyuan only nodded slightly and did not express any opinion. As long as she was happy, it didn't matter to him who she was worried about. Mrs. Xiao probably knew that she shouldn't mention outsiders, and seeing Xia Jinyuan's cold expression, she forced a smile and tried to make her expression look natural. The adults are always worried about a girl living alone, so they asked their mother to take care of her. Don't be angry, it's my duty. In the end, Xia Jinyuan answered politely and gave her some face. After that, he poured himself a cup of tea and slowly sipped it. Your dad told me that you're very, very busy. Yuan, no matter how busy you are, you have to take good care of yourself. You can't abuse your body just because you're young. You're not young anymore. You're 28 this year. You should consider finding a girlfriend to take care of yourself. Find someone who's gentle and quiet. I think a teacher would be a good choice. She has a lot of time, and she might come to the army to take care of you during the summer and winter holidays. You can't find someone who's too busy or who's in the army. In the future, the two of you will be separated. No matter how strong your feelings are, they will fade. Find some time to spend more time with you, so that I can spend more time with you. Chapter 46-74. Madame Zhao's voice was the only sound in the quiet room. Xia Jinyuan continued to drink, and did not take her words to heart. As for finding a girlfriend, Madame Xiao did not need to worry about that. What I'm worried about the most is that you'll tire yourself out in the army. I'll only be at ease if you have someone to take care of you. I'll find some time to talk to your father. Ask Madame Xiao to keep an eye on you. She's good at judging people. If Madame Xiao doesn't have any good girls around her, I'll introduce some to you, okay? I know a few quiet girls. When the time comes, I'll introduce them to you, okay? At this point, Xia Jinyuan really wanted to laugh. He did, but it was cold and bone-chilling. Madame Xiao, you worry too much. You're just a stranger to me. Do you think I'll accept a stranger's kindness? I'm sorry, but I suspect you have ulterior motives. I think we should just forget about this meal. Take your time. Excuse me. After that, Xia Jinyuan stood up and pulled his chair. He really did not want to accompany Madame Xiao for dinner. He could not even bear to spend half an hour with her. He really did not understand how Madame Xiao had the audacity to interfere with his marriage in front of him. His words dealt a heavy blow to Madame Xiao. She stood up abruptly with a pained expression and began to get agitated. Yuan, you're gouging my heart out by saying this. How can you hurt me like this? Yuan, you still haven't forgiven me. You still hate me, right? Tell me, what should I do to get your forgiveness? How can you forgive me and accept me? I know I was wrong. I did stupid things when I was young and I owe you. Can you give me a chance to turn over a new leaf? Xia Jinyuan, whose path was blocked, looked slightly cold, but he endured it until she finished speaking. He said coldly, "I thought I made it clear last time. Do you really not understand? Or are you pretending not to understand?" Yuan. Her voice tore through the air and filled the room with sadness. What did he say last time? Last time, he said please don't disturb him again. He did not need a stranger's concern. He had stopped needing it a long time ago. Yuan, I'm your mother. Mother carried you for 10 months and gave birth to you. You are my flesh and blood. How can you be a stranger? Mom really knows she's wrong. Tell me what I can do to get your forgiveness. Tell me, okay? In the past, Mrs. Xiao, who had been neglected because of her husband's work, abandoned her young son for love. Now, half a lifetime had passed in the blink of an eye. When she looked back and realized the mistakes she had made when she was young, she wanted to make up for the broken relationship between mother and son. Only then did she realize that it was too difficult. It was so difficult for her to move forward, so difficult that she didn't know how to make up for it. I was wrong. I know I was wrong. Yuan, please forgive me. I know I was wrong. In the private room, Madame Xiao was crying as she spoke heartbreakingly. She really knew that she was wrong, but why was it so difficult to be forgiven? That was her son, not her enemy. Why was he so cruel to her? Why? Xia Jinyuan came out from the other side. Madame Xiao wanted to block him again, but Xia Jinyuan, whose veins were bulging on his forehead, took a deep breath and slowly exhaled. Madame Xiao, I agreed to have dinner with you tonight not because I wanted to hear your words. I just want to tell you, please don't disturb my life again, okay? Chapter 46-75. Xia Jinyuan was a cruel person. He would not tolerate or deal with people who had unrealistic thoughts and even tried to interfere with his personal life, even if they were his family. He would clearly tell them that he would be responsible for his own life and his future. He did not need anyone to stand up and point fingers at him or tell him what to do. He would always have a direction in his heart and would never allow himself to deviate from it. He had his own arrangements and plans, and he did not need anyone to interfere with his future. He always knew what he needed to do, and how he should do it. This was the best way to be responsible for himself. No matter what, he did not need anyone to point fingers or interfere. Especially Ms. Xiao. When she was young, she felt that she had been wronged and neglected by her husband. After she gave birth to a child, she did not have any free time to herself other than taking care of the child. She was like a canary locked in a golden cage. From the outside, she seemed to be rich and beautiful, but in reality, she was living without freedom. Therefore, for the sake of freedom, she gave up her identity as a canary. With a resolute attitude, she abandoned her young son and husband and threw herself into the embrace of freedom that she had found with the greatest passion. Later, after half of her life had passed, her youth was gone, and her freedom gradually lost its luster. The lover who had once ignited her passion for life was getting further and further away from her. One day, she found a new lover who could bring waves to her peaceful life. Finally, the two people who had once sought freedom and thought that they had found their soul mates divorced and went their separate ways. Finally, Ms. Xiao came to her senses and repented. She remembered that she still had a son in the country and that she had to make up for the mistakes she had made when she was young. She resolutely returned to the country. She thought that she would definitely be able to make up for the mistakes she had made. Just like what Mrs. Li said when she persuaded her to return to the country, the bond between mother and son is thicker than water. How could there be a son who doesn't recognize his mother? The bond between mother and son is thicker than water. How could there be a son who doesn't recognize his mother? Xia Jinyuan snorted softly and glanced at Ms. Xiao, whose face was full of despair. He walked away, leaving behind a handsome back view. A mother could abandon her own child, but in the end, how could she let her own child accept her without any grudges? A 3 or 4-year-old child woke up one day to find himself sleeping in the closet, and the mother he loved the most was having an affair with another man on the bed. The mother he loved the most abandoned him and ran away. Although he was young at that time, he knew that his mother would never come back. Later, the grown-up child once again saw his mother, who he thought had gone far away and would never return. He saw her treating another little girl affectionately as if they were mother and daughter. When he saw the real father and son, his mother looked at him as if he was looking at a piece of trash. She spat out sharp and harsh words word by word. It was like a basin of cold water was poured into the grown-up child's heart, completely extinguishing the last trace of the child's love for his mother. It didn't take much time for them to go from being disheartened to being relieved, only about 5 to 6 years. Now it had been more than 10 years. In more than 10 years, children of 3 or 4 years old would have found another life partner. Maternal love? I really don't need it. Xia Jinyuan didn't look back as he strode away. Even if Ms. Xiao collapsed on the ground and cried sadly and desperately, he wouldn't feel the slightest bit of pity for her. If he saw a stranger crying, he would go out and ask if they needed help. Ms. Xiao was even worse than a stranger. Chapter 46-76. Madame Zhao's cries didn't bring Xia Jinyuan back. The waiter who served the dishes stood by the side in a dilemma. In the end, the manager helped Madame Xiao back to her seat and asked Du Jiai to pick her up and take her home. The moment Du Jiai stepped out of the elevator in a hurry, she saw the young man standing outside the elevator. Her delicate face suddenly changed, and panic flashed across her eyes. Xia Jinyuan glanced at her indifferently and walked straight into the elevator. As soon as he moved, Du Jiai, who was standing in the middle of the elevator, instinctively took a step back. She realized what she had done and was secretly upset. She bit her lower lip, held her breath, and walked out quickly. Ding! The elevator door closed behind her. Du Jiai, whose eyes were glued to the marble floor, seemed to have thought of something as she abruptly turned her head to look at the closed elevator door. Xia Jinyuan. Why is he here? Auntie Xiao said that she had something urgent to attend to. Could it be? The urgent matter Auntie Xiao mentioned was meeting Xia Jinyuan? It had only been 15 minutes since she received Auntie Xiao's call saying that she had something urgent to deal with. Last time, Auntie Xiao said that she hadn't seen Xia Jinyuan for a long time and didn't know where he went. If she had seen him just now, why did they only chat for 10 minutes? Du Jiai saw Madame Xiao with questions in her mind. Before she could ask, she was shocked by Madame Zhao's haggard face and quickly walked over. Auntie Xiao, what's wrong? You're fine. Why are you crying? When the heartbroken Madame Xiao saw the young lady's worry for her, she suddenly raised her hand and gently caressed Du Jiai's face, revealing a smile that was uglier than crying. Jiai, why aren't you Auntie Zhao's daughter? People always say that daughters are sweet little jackets. They're not wrong. Aren't daughters their parents' sweet little jackets? Even you care about me and worry about me, but... Tears flowed down from Madame Zhao's eyes. She was crying and laughing at the same time. Du Jiai was so anxious that she grabbed the hand that was stroking her face. Auntie Xiao, don't cry. What's wrong? What happened? Tell me quickly, tell me quickly. She glanced at the dining table from the corner of her eyes. The untouched food on the table confirmed her suspicions. She frowned and swallowed before she dared to ask in a soft voice, Did you bump into him? Did he make you angry again? Don't be angry, Aunt Xiao. He's not worth your anger. Du Jiai's fear of Xia Jinyuan was so deep in her bones that she didn't dare to mention his name. She only dared to use him instead. Madame Xiao cried and laughed. She had lost all her poise. Even you know that I'm angry, but my son doesn't. He clearly heard me crying, but he was so heartless that he didn't even turn around to look at me. How could he be so cruel? Why is he so cruel? How good would it be if it was a daughter? A daughter like Jai would definitely be soft-hearted and forgive me, right? How good would it be if it was a daughter? Auntie Xiao wants a daughter. Madame Xiao, who was in her 50s, cried like a helpless child. Du Jai tried to coax her, but to no avail. In the end, Du Jai had no choice but to ask Madame Li for help. Madame Li arrived just as Xia Jinyuan was knocking on Major General Yang's door. It was 10 o'clock at night. The bustle of the day gradually dissipated, and the silence of the night came quietly. The military compound was quieter than anywhere else. There wasn't even the sound of night insects. Only the whistling of the north wind could be heard. Chapter 46-77. The knocks on the door at 10 o'clock in the evening were particularly abrupt. Xia Jinyuan, who was checked by the guards before they let him in, didn't press the doorbell. He just knocked on the door one by one, which made Major General Yang, who was talking to his son, stunned. Why didn't you press the doorbell? Major General Yang's only son, who was in his first year of college, stood up and opened the door. Mother Yang, who was cleaning the kitchen, wiped her hands and said with a smile, "I'll open the door. You and your father have a chat. They haven't seen each other for a long time." Major General Yang's expression changed slightly when he heard the knocks on the door again. He stood up and said to his only son, "I'll go. You help your mother clean the kitchen." He had probably guessed who it was that came knocking at his door in the middle of the night. "Your soldier?" Mother Yang stopped and turned to her only son. "You go back to your room. Don't disturb your father." Major General Yang, who was walking to the door, waved his hand and said, "No, I'll walk outside with him. We won't enter the house. Rest early." He was still a little scared when he let that kid enter the house. If Xiao Yi hadn't been sent out, it wouldn't have been a big deal. But Mother Yang had never expressed her own opinion on anything related to Major General Yang, so she didn't say anything. She only said, "I don't know how your soldiers can endure your bad temper." Then she said to her only son, "Don't learn from your father in the future." Major General Yang's only son was 19 years old. His name was Yu. He was a literary talent, educated, and spoke elegantly. Hearing this, the 19-year-old Yang Yu raised his eyebrows and laughed. "Only you and his soldiers can tolerate my father's bad temper. I can tolerate it sometimes." Then, he turned to Major General Yang, who was about to walk out, and said, "Dad, go out and wear a coat. It's cold and you're already so old. Don't be stubborn in front of your young and strong soldiers. My mother will be the one who gets sick." Major General Yang's face was half black. Mother Yang held back her laughter, took a coat from the room, and chased after him. "You is right. You should admit that you're old. Do you really think you're in your 20s? Major General Yang didn't want to take the coat, but he thought it was cold to walk outside in the middle of winter. He took the coat and said, "Rest early. You don't have to wait for me." All right. Come back quickly." Just like that, Major General Yang was pushed out by his wife. Since Major General Yang didn't intend to invite the soldiers into the house, Mother Yang didn't personally open the door. She only pushed Major General Yang to the entrance, and then turned back to the living room. When the door opened, Major General Yang said directly, "You're here to deliver the car. Leave the key and you can go." In the end, he left the key behind, but he didn't leave. 2 hours later, Major General Yang, who was shivering from the cold, returned home. When Mother Yang heard the sound of the door opening, she quickly boiled a bowl of thick ginger soup. As soon as the bowl of hot ginger soup entered his stomach, Major General Yang felt his body gradually warm up. Seeing her husband's frozen purple lips gradually return to normal, Mother Yang felt distressed and said, "Isn't it better to talk in your study? Why did you have to go out for a walk? You must be freezing to the bone. I wonder if you'll catch a cold tomorrow morning. Next time, when your soldiers come over in the middle of winter, invite them over. It won't affect you much, but you have to suffer. Major General Yang never received subordinates who came to his house in person except for work. Mother Yang knew her husband's character, so she didn't say much before. Now that he saw Major General Yang's lips turn purple from the cold, his heart ached and he couldn't help but say a few more words. Chapter 46-78. Major General Yang rubbed his stomach that was starting to warm up. After a while, he sighed and said, "Commander-in-Chief Xia's only son is here. He's a devil incarnate. He wouldn't visit a temple for no reason. How would I dare to let him in?" Mother Yang wanted to smash the bowl in her husband's face, but then she remembered Major General Yang's temper. She could only snatch the bowl from Major General Yang's hand and glare at him before getting up and leaving. She couldn't say something unfair like, "I don't care about other soldiers, but how could you reject Commander-in-Chief Xia's only son outside the door?" Even though she wanted to say it, she could only keep it in her heart. At 1 o'clock in the morning, G3, who was staying at the base, received a call from their commander, Xia Jinyuan. When G3 received the call in the middle of the night, he thought it was an urgent mission. After listening to it, G3 was silent for a long time before he sighed softly. You don't mean what you say. Didn't you say you wanted her to be independent? Why are you the first to object when it's time for her to be independent? Major General Yang is right. You seem to be very cruel to Yi Qian. You're so cruel that you can personally teach him a lesson. You're also so cruel that you can take him to the battlefield. But don't you think that your cruelty is limited to? G3 paused. Xia Jinyuan asked, "Limited to what? Don't keep me in suspense. If you're a man, just say it." F***ck, how am I not a man? G3 gritted his teeth and decided to sit down and talk through the night. "I'm just wondering if you'll accept my personal opinion later. Don't dawdle. Think about the last time you were cruel to Yi Qian. Think about it carefully. I think you should be able to guess what I want to say. You should also understand why Major General Yang said that you're the one who can't bear to let go in the end. You're right. Yi Qian went out to be independent and couldn't bear to let go in the end. It was indeed you. I didn't expect it either. But when I think about what you've done in the past, I don't find it surprising. It's normal." After hearing what G3 said, Xia Jinyuan really started to think about when he had been ruthless to Yi Qian. After thinking about a few fragments, Xia Jinyuan's handsome face, which was originally cold, suddenly stiffened. He seemed to have guessed what G3 wanted to say, guessed what he wanted to say, and understood why Major General Yang said that in the end, he would be the one who couldn't bear to let go. Every time he scolded Yi Qian, it was when he was by her side. Every time Yi Qian went out to fight, he was also by her side. In other words, he knew that he had to train Yi Qian fiercely so that she could grow better. But unknowingly, his actions completely went against his wishes. "Do you know what I want to say?" G3 broke the short silence. With their captain's ability, it was easy to think about it. Xia Jinyuan pursed his thin lips and said, After thinking for a while, he said, "That's true. I told her that she could only come back alive with her own efforts and become the strongest support for her comrades. I knew it very well in my heart, but my actions completely deviated from the truth. Think about it carefully. Every time I was cruel to her, it was because I was by her side. I have to reflect on it." Xia Jinyuan, who thought about the key points, didn't relax his brows. Instead, his brows furrowed even deeper. He had always thought that he could control his emotions well and treat others well. He had always thought so and always thought that he did so. It could only be said that the onlooker sees more clearly than the person involved. Chapter 46-79. Major General Yang saw this and remembered it in his heart. He told Xia Jinyuan at the appropriate time to make him realize that even though he treated Yi Qian equally during training, He still subconsciously protected Yi Qian under his wings and did not truly let go. That was why he panicked when he found out that she was going out on a mission alone. He could not help but want to go on a mission with her, and he could not help but want to know more about her. Now that he heard what G3 said, Xia Jinyuan did not have a good solution for the time being. He needed to calm down and think about it carefully. You should rest early. I will return to the base the day after tomorrow. Xia Jinyuan wanted to be alone and think about it calmly. He was about to end the call when G3 stopped him in time. Hey, you woke me up. I don't mind enlightening you again. After all, I don't have many opportunities to enlighten you. Xia Jinyuan laughed and raised his eyebrows. Why? You finally got the chance to lecture me. Are you trying to get back at me in one go? Ha, you're measuring the heart of a gentleman with your own mean measure. G3 also laughed. Actually, you don't have to feel burdened. Even though you've always been protecting Yi Qian, you always know what you're doing. You're not protecting Yi Qian wholeheartedly. Actually, it's normal for you to put Yi Qian right under your nose. Other than being your comrade, she's also your lover. What kind of man is a man if he can't protect his lover? It's completely a man's nature to protect Yi Qian. If you don't believe me, let me ask you. If there's a mission that only Yi Qian can complete, and no one else can, but it's very dangerous, you might not be able to come back. At that time, the situation is very tense and you can't think of a better solution. Captain Xia, what would you do? Would there be a second choice? No. Without any consideration, Xia Jinyuan said in a deep voice, there wouldn't be a second choice. Yi Qian is the first choice. That's right, you would definitely do that. We all believe that you would do that. So, it's normal for you to put Yi Qian right under your nose to protect him. We can all understand and accept it. The reason Major General said this is to remind you to let go when it's time to let go. When it's time to protect, Major General won't hesitate. You're the one who messed up. G3 originally had a slight smile on his face, but his eyes gradually turned serious. Could it be that Yi Qian has already gone on a solo mission this time? Tall? Danger? Not our team's mission? At this point, Xia Jinyuan pursed his lips and lowered his voice. Undercover, core member of the Golden Triangle, one person. The specific mission is unknown. Major General Yang had originally planned to find out more tonight, but who would have thought that after being exposed to the cold wind for 2 hours, Major General Yang still couldn't find out anything. Undercover agents and core members of the Golden Triangle were naturally related to drug dealers. So why did they need Yi Qian to go? Unless the situation was very tricky and they needed someone who was strong in all aspects, and male soldiers couldn't do the job and could only be completed by female soldiers, Yi Qian, who was outstanding in all aspects, became the first choice. G3's heart sank slightly. Yi Qian, who was far away in Yun Province, didn't know that her first undercover mission had already made many people worried. Yi Qian woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning. Xia Jinyuan, who was startled awake, held her hand tightly and said seriously, "We'll wait for you to come back. Please come back safely." Yi Qian, who had already completed his disguise, held her hand back. She smiled without a trace of fear. "Don't worry, I'll definitely come and find you when I come back. If I can't find you, I'll bring my brother to find you." It was considered a test. Chapter 4680. When she suddenly mentioned Li Jinyan, a young and stern face flashed across Nian Anian's mind. His eyes were like cold stars, and his back was as steady as a mountain. He had only seen him once, but the memory was so vivid, as if it had happened yesterday. The corners of her mouth curled up, revealing a smile as bright as the morning sun. "All right, I'll wait for you to come back and find me. It's a deal. It's a deal." The two like-minded girls high-fived and smiled at each other like old friends. "I know you and you know me, so there was no need to say more." Captain Deng personally sent Yi Qian to the car, but it was inconvenient for Nian Nian to do so. Walking through the corridor of the drug sniffer dog training ground, Captain Deng reminded her again and again, "Remember to protect yourself first. Don't act recklessly and don't underestimate those drug dealers. They are active at the border all year round, dealing with the anti-drug police forces of various countries. Sometimes their abilities are not as ordinary as you think. Never underestimate them. Even if it's a child, your inadvertent exposure can be fatal. Don't trust anyone easily. Before you have a good foundation, don't move around casually. They are a group of drug dealers who would rather kill 1,000 innocents than let one person go. They won't listen to any explanation, and will only solve the problem cruelly in their own way. Do more, talk less, and protect yourself first. Do you understand?" Captain Deng spoke for as long as the corridor was long, and some of his words were repeated over and over again. He didn't stop until he reached the car door. 2 plainclothes policemen came to pick up Yi Qian. They greeted Captain Deng first, and then introduced themselves to Yi Qian. Captain Deng waited for them to finish their introductions, and then said to the 2 plainclothes policemen, "Before Xiao Yi leaves, I'll leave her safety to you too. You must protect her well." "Don't worry, Captain, we know." The door of the sliding door opened, and one of the plainclothes policemen asked Yi Qian to get in. Yi Qian, who was standing in front of the door, was about to step in, but then he retracted his right leg and turned to look at Captain Deng. He gave a solemn military salute. "Captain Deng, wait for my good news." "Okay." Captain Deng, who returned the salute, nodded. "I believe you will bring back good news safely." News and safety were both indispensable. However, what they lacked the most when carrying out high-risk missions was safety. After the car had driven for some distance, Yi Qian turned back to look at the back of the car. She saw that Captain Deng was still standing there motionlessly, silently watching her leave. As the captain of the narcotics squad, Captain Deng didn't know how many comrades he had sent out to carry out high-risk missions. Every time he saw them off, his mood would be the worst and the heaviest. He liked to see his comrades return safely, but the thing he didn't want to see the most was his comrades who came back with their eyes closed forever. Even after experiencing so many life-and-death separations, Captain Deng was still afraid of the scene that he did not want to see the most. "Xiao Yi, you're a Special Forces soldier. Use all your skills and abilities as a Special Forces soldier. I believe you'll be able to return safely." The departing car had long disappeared from his sight. Deng Dui, who had almost blended into the night, was still standing there. It was not until the wind blew and brought a burst of chill that he slowly turned and left. She couldn't sleep from 2 in the morning until the morning assembly. She didn't sleep, nor did she lie in bed. She just sat there until dawn. She found Captain Deng and decided to return to the capital today. Captain Deng did not force her to stay. They had already found the most suitable spy and had sent it out. If Anian wanted to leave early, they could do as she wished. Chapter 4681. After Nian Nian left Yun Province, Yi Qian sat in a vehicle heading towards the border. It wasn't until 1 o'clock in the afternoon that she arrived at a small border town. Next, it was time to pick the goods, and she was the goods being picked. The 2 plainclothes policemen became human traffickers who were familiar with the place. One of them kept an eye on Yi Jian while the other went to the market outside. About 2 hours later, he brought back a skinny middle-aged woman in her early 40s with a pair of shrewd eyes. When the middle-aged woman came in, she looked at Yi Qian as if she was picking goods. She looked up and down and finally nodded. It was done. The 2 plainclothes policemen saw that it was done. They took a deep breath and secretly gave Yi Qian an "okay" hand signal before leaving the shabby hotel. It was already the 3rd day that Yi Qian entered a small town in the Golden Triangle. On the 3rd day, she was alone with a small bag wrapped in a beautiful blue cloth. She asked around if there was anything she could do and where she could return to China. Yi Qian, who had escaped, began to wander. When she was tired, she would sleep in a corner of the town. When she was hungry, she would go to the town to ask for food. She kept asking how she could leave and return to China. The town was the last one to enter the Golden Triangle. The people living in the town were either drug dealers or planted forbidden flowers in the mountains. They were very vigilant against outsiders, especially people like Yi Qian, who had been tricked into coming to the Golden Triangle. Girls who wanted to return home would not easily get close to him. There were rules in the underworld. Whoever broke the rules would be cutting off their own path of survival. No one would help Yi Qian leave the town out of pity. The town was very strict against outsiders and was especially vigilant against strangers. Who knew if a girl who came to the town would call the police when she returned to China? Chinese people liked to find the police when they were in trouble. The town was surrounded by mountains, and there was only one winding Huangshe road leading to the outside. Yi Qian walked out of the town several times but eventually returned. Some people kept an eye on her, while others sent messages to certain places to see if there was anyone who had escaped recently. On the morning of the 7th day, Yi Qian thanked 1,000 times and got into a kind-hearted person's car and finally drove out of town. Someone watched the car leave through the dusty glass. 5 minutes later, Captain Deng of the Anti-Drug Task Force in Cherry City received the latest news that the undercover who fled to the nearest town to the Golden Triangle was picked up and headed to the core of the Golden Triangle. After receiving the call, Captain Deng's eyes darkened as he said in a deep voice, "Keep an eye on them during this period of time. If there's any news, report it immediately." The anti-narcotics police's net had already been opened. Whether or not they could catch the big fish, whether or not they could completely eliminate the newly born poison chain, all depended on this net. Captain Deng, who had stayed up all night, hung up the phone and walked out of the office. As soon as he walked out of the gloomy sky, a golden light suddenly broke through the layers of dark clouds and shot straight to the ground like a golden arrow. Dark clouds covered the entire ground, but this golden light pierced through thousands of mountains and thousands of rivers and just illuminated the office building in front of him. There were countless martyrs guarding the place. The female soldiers who had left last night stood on the wall of martyrs and saluted again. But today, the golden light shot straight like an arrow. The majestic momentum seemed to be able to cut a path out of the bottomless abyss. Captain Deng stood outside and looked up at the golden light until it disappeared. It was a very good sign, a sign that could gradually improve his mood. Next was a tough battle, and he and his comrades were already prepared for it. They were just waiting for the tough battle to start. Chapter 4682. Yi Qian, who had already entered the border of another country, started to make a ruckus in the car. She shouted that she wanted to get out of the car, that she wanted to go home. She was slapped in the face several times, and the person in the car with her threatened to kill her if she screamed again. She was so scared that she didn't dare to make a ruckus anymore. She didn't even dare to cry. Because the other party really showed her a scimitar that was about 20 centimeters long and 4 centimeters wide. The sharpened scimitar flashed past Yi Qian's eyes. A cold gleam flashed across her eyes, and the cold gleam of the blade pierced into Yi Qian's eyes. She couldn't help but close her eyes. She was so scared that she didn't even dare to cry. Yi Qian had been watched since the first day she escaped into the small town. By the second day, her whereabouts and how she entered the country from the Chinese side were all clearly investigated. On the third day, she was secretly watched. On the fourth day, they watched her even more closely. On the fifth and sixth day, they began to arrange her whereabouts. On the seventh day, they successfully lured her into the car. The car was bumpy all the way. They turned many corners and passed through many mountains. Listening to the mountain wind whistling past their ears, they saw the mountains one after another behind them. Yi Qian, who was in the tiger's den, was getting further and further away from the Chinese border. In order to prevent Yi Qian from escaping, the two people in the car only gave Yi Qian very little water to drink for 2 consecutive days. Other than that, there was no food. Being able to endure hunger was a hurdle that a special forces soldier had to go through. Yi Qian's record of being able to endure hunger and lack of water was 6 days. Xia Jinyuan's record was 7 days, and the Snowfield Brigade's record was 9 days. 2 days of drinking only a small amount of water was enough for Yi Qian. On the 4th day, Yi Qian, who had secretly memorized the route, arrived at a small mountain village. "Get out of the car." The car door opened. The thin man who had been watching over Yi Qian directly reached out and grabbed Yi Qian's wrist. He pulled hard and forcefully pulled Yi Qian out of the car. 11 days after leaving China, Yi Qian arrived at a small village in Myanmar. The entire village was surrounded by undulating mountains. It was like a paradise, but it was also dangerous. Before coming here, Yi Qian had an understanding of the terrain of the entire Golden Triangle and how many days it would take to enter the core area of the Golden Triangle. According to their current travel time and vehicle speed, it would take at least 2 days to reach the core area. Moreover, they had not entered a traffic blind spot yet and could still drive a car. It was enough to show that she had not approached the dark zone where various forces were divided and where deformities were bred that could corrupt the energy of civilized society. Although they had yet to enter the core of the darkness, Yi Qian could smell the faint scent of biscuits in the air. He knew that she was nearing the outermost edge of the darkness, the edge of what seemed to be calm. The biscuit-like aroma was naturally not emitted by real biscuits, but the aroma of sesame fruit. She was still outside the small mountain village and had not completely entered it, but she could already smell the aroma of sesame fruit. Once she entered the village, she was afraid that the entire village would be shrouded in the aroma of sesame fruit. Sesame fruit, also known as magu, was a processed drug of ice. The main ingredients were methamphetamine, caffeine, and so on. Most of them were in the form of pills. The poison directly acted on the central nervous system and had a hallucinogenic effect. It was highly addictive and extremely harmful. Accurately identifying various drugs by smell was also a test that Yi Jian had to pass in the early morning of the day she arrived at the narcotics unit. That early morning, she saw a total of 108 kinds of drugs and smelled 108 kinds of drugs. After smelling them, she plunged her head into a basin of cold water that had been prepared in advance to disperse the mixed smell that lingered at the tip of her nose. That night was the most mentally exhausting night in her history. It was also the night that she memorized the most information and the fastest speed. It was also the night that she received the most and most complete drugs. It shocked her to the core. Chapter 4683. It wasn't until Yi Qian stood here that he truly understood Captain Deng's good intentions and why they were so strict in choosing the most suitable undercover agent. She only stood at the outermost periphery of the village and only touched a little of the darkness, but she knew how big and cold the iceberg was under the darkness. Walking into the small village, there were children running happily. When they saw people coming in, their first reaction was not to avoid them, but to make a pistol gesture with both hands and shoot at the 3 people entering the village, simulating a gunfight. These were all children's games, and the adults were used to it. A man who was no more than 25 years old fearlessly walked over barefoot with only a horizontal apron with the local ethnic characteristics around his waist and a big knot on the left side of his waist. When he passed by the children, he raised his hand and pushed one of the children's head and said in the local language, "Useless boy, if I give you a real gun, do you dare to use it? Give us a real gun, give us a real gun." A few children ran around the young man, and one of them directly hugged his leg and said that he wanted to give them a real gun. The young man laughed and kicked the child down, but the children didn't cry. They got up and threw 2 handfuls of soil at the young man, and then they all laughed and left. This was the periphery of the Golden Triangle, and the traffic was quite smooth. There were also cars that could enter the village, and this village was also the first village to enter the core of the Golden Triangle. Yi Qian, who was dragged out of the car, kept his head down, but the corner of his eyes had a panoramic view of the surroundings. The young man walked in front of the three people who entered the village. He looked at Yi Qian from head to toe, and then said to the two people who kidnapped Yi Qian, "New goods? Who are they?" "They came from the mountains in China to work, and were kidnapped to Yun province to be sold to the kidnappers. They didn't expect the Burmese police to suddenly come, and the kidnappers hurriedly ran away with a few goods. On the way, they met the Burmese police, and all the goods were lost. One of them ran into our town. The kidnappers were the largest group responsible for the trafficking of women in the three countries' border. The leader was the middle-aged woman who helped Yi Qian that day. She was called the Kidnappers by the people in Burmese who were familiar with the market." "Are you sure there's no problem?" the young man asked again. One of them spoke Chinese and coaxed Yi Qian to get into the car. The Burmese man, whose ancestors were all Chinese, said, "We've been watching her for 6 days and investigating her for 4 days. She's clean. Even if she killed someone or left someone behind, no one could trace her." They were now deep in the mountains and forests where there were few people around. Even if someone occasionally passed by, even if they saw a skeleton in the forest, they wouldn't be surprised. They wouldn't go to the police and bring trouble to themselves. That was why the man who spoke Chinese was so certain. The other man, who couldn't speak Chinese, pointed at the wooden house not far away and said a few words coldly. The young man who received the two men moved aside and gestured for them to lock them up first. The car had been on the road for 4 days, and they had finished all the food they could eat. When the car passed by the mountain village, they needed to prepare food for the next 3 days, fill up the car with gas, and stock up 2 barrels of fuel for the road before driving away. Yi Qian, who had a machete pressed against his back, was pushed twice. The Burmese man, who spoke Chinese and looked like a Chinese, threatened again, "Don't jump around. Be careful of the machete in my hand. It can easily chop off your head and kick it like a football. See? It's just like the football they're playing now. It's a human skull." Chapter 46-84. Yi Qian looked in the direction of his finger and saw a few children who had been playing games earlier kicking a grayish-white object around their feet like a soccer ball. That was a human skull. The children who kicked a human skull like a soccer ball without batting an eyelid had no fear at all. The environment had shaped their temperament, and the environment had also cultivated their ferocious side from a young age. When they grew up, they would be a new batch of drug makers, drug traffickers, and even perpetrators who would carry on the darkness to the end. This cycle continued for generation after generation. The wind in the mountains blew, bringing with it a chill down his spine. Yi Qian, whose eyelids were trembling slightly, looked away in panic. She lowered her head and pretended that she didn't dare to look. She was so scared that her whole body was trembling. In response, the young man who came to the reception room laughed out loud. After laughing, he said, "The new goods are not bad. If you don't have any use for them, you can sell them overseas for a good price. Some Westerners like Asians with black hair, black eyes, and fair skin, especially Chinese people. They like them even more." He looked at Yi Qian with an extremely naked gaze. He even suddenly reached out his hand and forcibly lifted Yi Qian's chin. His eyes flashed with obvious amazement. He even swallowed saliva and his Adam's apple kept moving. The new goods that had just arrived kept her head down, so he didn't get a good look. Now that he got a good look, he realized how beautiful she was. She was so beautiful that he wanted to test the goods. Yi Qian, who hadn't even entered the core area, encountered one of the biggest dangers that Captain Deng had mentioned on her first day. The young man was already lustful. His hand reached out to touch Yi Qian's face. Such a beautiful goods probably won't have a chance to come out after going in. You're actually willing to let her go? Yi Qian, who felt a chill in her heart, didn't dare to show any coldness in her eyes. She could only forcefully turn her head to avoid the man's hand, which smelled like nuts. Not only did the young man not give up, but he also became more interested. He clicked his tongue a few times, and there was a hint of lewdness in his laughter. He spoke in Burmese, which was Yi Qian's weakness. It was also the weakness that Captain Deng regretted the most. He even asked Yi Qian to learn Burmese as much as possible while she was under cover. With such a strong memory, it shouldn't be a problem for her to learn Burmese in 2 to 3 months. The Drug Enforcement Division's drug enforcement officer was the fastest to learn Burmese in 6 months. Yi Qian remembered Captain Deng's suggestion. If possible, she hoped that she could learn Burmese in 2 to 3 months. She could only endure the man's lewd smile. The driver, who didn't speak much, raised his hand and waved the young man's dirty hand away. He said a few words without any emotion. Yi Jian saw the young man's expression change abruptly, and a trace of fear flashed across his eyes. He resentfully withdrew his hand and said in a low voice. He pointed to a dilapidated wooden house in front of them, indicating for them to bring her inside and lock her up. Then, he picked up a bamboo whistle with a red string hanging around his neck and blew it. Soon, the sound of branches rustling could be heard from the dense forest. 2 men in Burmese traditional attire walked over with rifles on their back. They were responsible for locking Yi Qian up. After taking 2 steps, the young man said something again. Yi Qian turned around and saw the man's evil smile. When he saw Yi Qian looking over, he licked his purplish lip. His lustful thoughts didn't disappear because of that. His expression was gloomy because of his unwillingness to give up. Chapter 4685. Yi Qian didn't pay much attention to his gloomy expression. He was afraid of the driver. Captain Deng had told him that Burmese people usually wouldn't provoke people who were more powerful than them. What made her heart sink a little was his evil smile. Then, the young man pointed at the wooden house and stared at Yi Qian. His evil smile widened. What was in the wooden house? Yi Qian hurriedly looked away. She hugged the cloth bag that had been searched countless times. Even the buttons on her clothes were searched. She trembled as she walked to the front of the wooden house. Clang! Suddenly, something flew over from the left. It hit the wooden door and bounced back to fall at Yi Qian's feet. She looked down and saw a nightmarish skull right in front of Yi Qian. Yi Qian screamed from the forest. She screamed as she jumped up and ran outside. One of the men who escorted her grabbed her collar and the other grabbed her arm. She couldn't even take 3 steps before she was pulled back. The children laughed loudly. Their voices were clear, but for some reason, it made Yi Qian shiver. Why was evil in these places? Because there was a successor. Yi Qian was pushed into the wooden house while the children laughed. Then, the door was slammed shut. A layer of dust fell from the wooden door. The dust rose into the air and floated into Yi Qian's nose. A damp and musty smell entered her nose. Yi Jianxian originally thought that seeing a human skull would be the biggest show of strength today. However, when she smelled the lingering stench in the air and tried to smell it, it disappeared. Yi Jianxian knew that the real show of strength was the ghastly white skeleton over there that was still wearing clothes. The skeleton's body, limbs, and torso were all there. The only thing missing was the head. And the reason why the young man was harboring evil intentions was probably because of this eerie white skeleton. The people outside heard even more horrified screams coming from inside. The old wooden door, which had turned dark gray due to the sun and rain, was being slapped so hard that it seemed like it would break into pieces if it was slapped a little harder. "Don't make noise. Shut up." The fierce-looking man guarding outside used a homemade gun to hit the door a few times. He warned Yi Qian to stop making noise in the local language. "Tang Ta, what's inside?" The Burmese man who spoke Chinese frowned. Now is the time when we need your help. I hope that our two villages can always get along well. Maji, if I didn't want our two villages to get along well, I would have dragged your new goods into the forest and tasted them myself. Tang Ta was the man who lusted after Yi Qian. He was the elected leader of the village, similar to the village chief of the Chinese village. He coaxed Yi Jian into the car. The man who could speak fluent Chinese was called Maji in Burmese and Zhu Xing in Chinese. Emoji did not want to have a conflict with Tang Ta. Although their villages were not close, they had always helped each other and helped each other to produce poisonous materials to sell. Therefore, the relationship between the two villages had always been very good. As for why Tang Ta was afraid of the driver's words, it was because the driver came from the core area of the Golden Triangle. He didn't have any other identity other than being a driver who transported drugs. A driver could make the leader of a village afraid. It was obvious how dangerous the core area was. Chapter 4686. The three of them left together, but the screams from the other side of the door did not stop. They could still hear the new goods banging on the door and screaming, "I want to go out, I want to go out." Ah, go out? Go where? Back to China? Is that even possible? Don't even think about it. Inside the wooden house, Yi Qian slapped his hands until his palms burned with pain. The locked wooden door did not open, and the two men guarding outside allowed Yi Qian to cry. The children playing in the house ran over to pick up the skull that they had intentionally kicked. Hearing the cries from the wooden house, one of the older children held the skull and pretended to be an adult. With one hand on his waist he yelled, "If you cry again, I will chop off your head. I will chop you with the machete that I used to chop firewood." As soon as he finished speaking, the children around him imitated him. Killing people was not a big deal to them, but a very casual thing to do. The two Burmese men guarding the door yelled, and the children made a few faces at the two men. The older child threw the skull in his hands to the ground, and the children rushed forward. One moment they held the skull, the next they kicked it. To them, the skull was just a toy. Inside the wooden house, Yi Qian listened to their laughter, and his eyes were cold. "Xiao Yi, don't underestimate the children over there. Children can also pick up weapons to kill and hurt you. The environment they grew up in tells them that killing is not a big deal, and that they can kill anyone who offends their interests. Regardless of the environment, adults and children are treated the same. Adults and children treated the same." At this point, Yi Qian understood Captain Deng's advice. Even a wildfire could not burn it out, and it would grow again with the spring breeze. There was only one way to solve this problem: eliminate it completely. After about 10 minutes, Yi Qian seemed to be tired. The cries went from high to low and then slowly stopped. It gave the guards outside the house the illusion that she was finally tired. Yi Jian's eyes were still as clear as water even though she was crying and throwing a tantrum. There were no tears at all. The only thing that made her uncomfortable was her high throat. Rubbing his dry throat, Yi Qian turned around and walked slowly towards the skeleton. The headless bones reminded her of a head that had been kicked around by a child. She then looked at the bones, which were so rotten that the original color of the cloth could no longer be seen. However, at a glance, she could tell that it was a knee-length skirt. A faint haze appeared in Yi Qian's eyes. The deceased was a girl with a height of about 150 or 160. If one tried to observe the color of her dress carefully, one could see that there were small pink flowers. The bottom of the dress should be a plain color, between white and grayish-green. Only one of the exposed feet had a shoe. It was not a high-heeled shoe, but a pair of canvas shoes with black cloth and white edges. Yi Qian was inclined to believe that the deceased was a very young girl. A very young girl. Yi Qian, who had come with a mission, thought of the dozen or so young girls who had gone missing. The average age was 19, the youngest was 16, and the oldest was 21. They came from poor mountain villages and left their homes to reduce the burden on their families. The narcotics police and the criminal police in charge of the investigation were unable to provide all the information on the missing girls. They visited the missing girls' homes and the surrounding neighbors, and then drew portraits of the missing girls based on their parents' appearances. They were all families that were stingy with money for even a single photo. The girls did not have a single photo of themselves. Fortunately, the criminal police who drew the portraits were very good. The portraits drawn based on the family members' descriptions were not 100% similar, but at least 85% similar. Chapter 4687. Yi Qian memorized all the portraits of the missing girls. She also memorized the colors and styles of clothes that the missing girls wore before they left, as well as the colors and styles of clothes that they brought with them. Now, she quickly searched her brain based on the colors and styles of the dresses. In less than a minute, a girl's portrait clearly entered her mind, as if it was a copy. Yi Jian closed her eyes gently as she curled her fingers. The missing girl had a knee-length dress that was similar to this. Could it be that this skeleton was her? She needed to confirm it again. She couldn't be sure just based on a similar dress. She needed to confirm it again. With her heart trembling, Yi Qian walked closer with light footsteps. She walked directly to the skeleton's leg. The girl's left pinky had been injured when she was young, so her 5 fingers had become 4. This was the best evidence to identify the skeleton. As Yi Qian approached, she slowly squatted down and gently moved away the withered grass covering the leg. She saw a pile of scattered bones. Some were small, some were big. The bones of the entire foot were messy. It was impossible to identify them immediately. She needed to examine the bones carefully. In order to find evidence that could prove her identity, Yi Qian needed to examine it closely, but she also needed to avoid being seen by the people outside. Other than moving the withered grass, Yi Qian didn't even move the scattered bones. Time passed little by little. Yi Qian, who had a good understanding of the human body structure and bones, started to assemble the scattered bones in her mind. Starting from the heel, she assembled them one by one, piece by piece. Every time she looked at the bones in her mind, she needed to assemble the left foot. Her eyes searched back and forth. Finally, a complete left leg appeared in her mind. At that moment, Yi Qian's clear eyes were filled with dark clouds that even the wind couldn't blow away. One of the missing girls had been found, but it was just a skeleton. After wiping away the traces she left behind, Yi Qian slowly retreated behind the wooden door. From time to time, she would raise her hand and knock on the door, weakly shouting, "Let her out. She wants to go home." The 2 men standing guard outside did not pay any attention to him, nor did they order Yi Qian to shut up. They stood guard like wooden stakes. After about half an hour, Yi Qian leaned against the wooden door and closed his eyes, taking a light nap for the past few days. Where would she go next? Everything was unknown. She only knew that she would face more dangers and difficulties in the future. Yi Jian, who had been sleeping soundly for 2 hours, heard footsteps coming from outside. She opened her eyes and began to knock on the wooden door that was not even stained with dust. Her voice was high and low as she kept repeating, "She wants to go home." The iron lock was opened, and the sound of the chains rattling could be heard. Yi Qian got up and banged on the wooden door even harder. She was panicking and anxious. Emoji kicked the wooden door open. The wooden door bounced back and hit Yi Qian's head. She cried out in pain. Emoji used his foot to block the wooden door that bounced back. He spun the scimitar in his hand skillfully in his palm. Standing at the door, he looked at the Chinese girl whose head was red from the impact and said lazily with a fake smile, "Let's go. I'll send you home." Who would believe him? Yi Qian naturally wouldn't believe him. She knew that he was lying to her. She didn't say anything. She hugged her bag tightly with tears in her eyes. The fear on her face pleased Emoji. "You know I won't let you go home. Why are you still screaming? Eat the sesame seed cake." Chapter 4688. She threw the pancake wrapped in leaves at Yi Qian's feet. The leaves fell, and the pancake, which had been baked in an iron pan, fell to the ground. One side was covered with dust. Yi Qian was hungry. She cried as she picked up the pancake. She ate it as she got into the car heading into the mountains. The driver was still the same driver, but the hat he always wore was replaced with a cowboy hat. The front was rolled up so that his vision would not be affected. When she got into the car, Yi Qian glanced at the driver from the corner of her eyes. She saw the green hair on the driver's forehead. It was the green at the roots of his hair after he shaved it off. Before he changed his hat, she clearly saw that there was a circle of greasy black hair around the brim of the hat that had not been washed for a few days. Looking down, Yi Qian quietly hid the suspicion that flashed in her eyes. The car, which had been parked for about 2 hours, started again and continued to drive into the depths of the mountains. In the evening, the sky had already darkened. The rolling mountains were like sleeping behemoths, blending into the cold night. Finally, the mountains and the sky merged into one, like a ferocious beast with its mouth wide open, waiting for its prey to walk into its trap. The car seemed to have reached the end of the mountain road, but the car did not stop and continued to move forward. The rumbling sound of the engine startled the birds that were resting at night. They flapped their wings and rushed into the dark sky. Yi Qian's pupils suddenly shrank as the birds flew away. It was not that there was no road, but a completely hidden mountain road that could avoid being photographed by satellites. There were more than 3,000 villages and towns of various sizes in the Golden Triangle. Due to the special geography, there were many deep valleys and rapid streams between the mountains. There were also bottomless canyons and endless cliffs. It was because of this special terrain that there was a large traffic dead zone. The possibility of outsiders wanting to enter was zero. The traffic dead zone not only prevented the villagers living in the mountains from interacting with the outside world, but also prevented the country from limited management and in-depth control of the villages. The complex terrain provided a natural refuge for countless drug traffickers. People from the outside could not enter, but people from the inside could go outside. At this time, Yi Qian's car drove into a hidden mountain road that was only accessible by one car. The side of the road was a small mountain road with a cliff. Along with the bumpy mountain road, they drove past cliffs and rivers. After 6 days of driving, the car was so bumpy that it felt like it was about to fall apart. Finally, they arrived at a village that was guarded by heavy guns. The stronghold was located at a relatively high altitude, and the fog-shrouded stronghold looked more like a place of cultivation secluded from the rest of the world. It did not look like a stronghold with a large number of poisonous goods coming and going. From here, they entered the core area of the Golden Triangle. The core area did not refer to a specific place, but it referred to a place where a large amount of drugs were sold. The driver got out of the car first. He went to the front of the pagoda in front of the village, put his palms together and bowed piously. Grabbing Yi Qian's collar, Emoji got off the car and walked to the front of the pagoda before letting go of Yi Qian's collar. He also put his palms together and bowed piously. The Burmese people were better than the Buddhas, so they created the phenomenon of rich Buddhas are poor people. The top of the Buddhist pagoda in front of the village was made of pure gold, but it had lost its golden luster due to age. The two of them did not enter the village immediately. They first greeted the whistle with a gun and stood outside quietly. After waiting for half an hour, someone finally came out. What surprised Yi Qian was that the person who came out was a monk with a shaved head, a thin layer of green hair covering his scalp, and wearing a khaki kasaya. Chapter 4689. Monk? She looked at the pagoda outside. Could it be a temple? Burmese people believed in Buddhism, and Buddhism was the national religion. Some Burmese even worshipped monks to show their piety. Could it be that the village was not a village but a temple? Why were there whistles with guns? Was it because a drug lord had come to the temple? The appearance of the monk caused Yi Qian's train of thought to stop for a few seconds. However, the monk who walked over did not behave like a monk. Even his face was very fierce. Yi Qian, who had been silently observing, immediately realized that she might have met a fake monk. Would a real monk have a gun at his waist? A monk's six senses were pure. How could he carry a gun? There was no information about a fake monk in the information provided by Captain Deng. The monk in the khaki kasaya looked at Maji. He did not know Maji, but he did not ask for his identity. Instead, he glanced at the driver, frowned, and asked a few questions in the local language. The driver lowered his head slightly. He was not as cold as he had been in the village 2 days ago. His posture was very humble as he answered. Yi Qian noticed that the driver looked at Maji after a few words. After a few more words, the fake monk's furrowed brows finally relaxed. With the driver's introduction, the fake monk started talking to Maji. At the end of his words, Emoji pushed Yi Jian, who had been lowering her head and looked like she was scared out of her wits, to the front of the monk. Even his expression became flattering. A very beautiful Chinese girl. There's no problem. Even if she dies, nothing will happen. He said a lot, and the fake monk listened. He glanced at the driver from time to time. When the driver nodded slightly, a faint smile appeared on his fierce face. When Maji saw the smile on the fake monk's face, he secretly sighed in relief. Yi Qian, who had been pushed in front of the 3 people, continued to lower her head. Her slightly trembling shoulders showed that she was very, very scared. The fake monk and Maji had a short conversation. Due to the language barrier, Yi Qian could not understand what they were saying. She was even more eager to learn Burmese. When the 2 of them ended their conversation, Yi Qian, who was being shoved away, saw the driver take off the cowboy hat that he hadn't taken off for several days. She saw that the driver had a bald head like the fake monk, but the roots of his hair were bluish-black. Is the driver outside, also using the identity of a monk as a cover? Yi Qian's eyes darkened as she entered the mountain stronghold guarded by whistles and spears. Just as she had guessed, the mountain stronghold was indeed a temple built deep in the mountains for the villagers to worship. The temple was not a real temple. Naturally, the monks guarding the temple were not real monks either. Apart from the Buddhist pagoda, which was a real Buddhist pagoda, everything else was a disguise for drug dealers. Yi Qian was dragged out and locked up alone. Emoji left with the fake monk and did not appear until daybreak the next day. 2 days later, Yi Qian, who had been imprisoned, seemed to have been forgotten. Other than someone who brought him a bowl of water and a pancake, no one else came by. On the 3rd day, someone came to deliver water and pancake. Then, for 2 consecutive days, no one was seen. It seemed that they were not really regretful. They just did not want to give Yi Qian too much food and water in case she had the strength to escape. On the 7th day, a bowl of water and a pancake were delivered punctually. On the 8th day, she was starved again. For 8 consecutive days, Yi Qian's activities were limited to the small room where she was locked up. During the day, she was accompanied by the sun, and at night, there were insects chirping. It was so quiet that it seemed like she was the only person in the mountain stronghold. On the 8th day, around 10 o'clock, Yi Qian, who had lost a lot of weight from hunger, heard the sound of countless cars and motors. The quiet mountain stronghold suddenly became lively. There were torches illuminating the dark night. Even from where she was, she could vaguely see the light of the torches. Push the book, gay friends good book. Yu Ban Qing pampered the book, baby Meng as betrothal gifts. Sweet wife, addicted to pampering, angrily threw 2 marriage certificates at her and forced her into a corner. He taunted, not satisfied? Serve me in bed. Not satisfied? Continue to serve me. Just search for the name of the pen or book. Chapter 4690. The village that was illuminated by the fire was no longer as peaceful as it used to be. However, there was no sound of people talking. As the car engine turned off, the village returned to its former tranquility. Even the fire was extinguished. If it wasn't for the faint light from the fire, Yi Qian would have thought that she was hallucinating due to hunger. Yi Jian took a deep breath. Even though she was so hungry that her stomach was sticking to her back, Yi Jian's skills were not affected at all. She ran up and kicked her legs against the wall. Then, she jumped up. Her slender body was as agile as a bird flying through the leaves. She stretched out her arms and grabbed the bars of the only window tightly. Using a pull-up position, she used her arms to exert force and finally saw the outside through the window. She was locked up in a utility room. The front of the room was extremely spacious. The surrounding trees were all cut down, creating an open-air square. The car that disturbed the tranquility of the mountain was parked in the square. There were people guarding the front and back of the car. Someone got out of the car. Even though the night was hazy, Yi Qian could still see who it was with the help of the light from the torch. The first man to get out of the car was none other than Ma Ji, who had coaxed her into the car and could speak fluent Chinese. He got out of the car first and immediately opened the back door. A middle-aged man in a suit with polished black leather shoes came out calmly while buttoning his suit jacket. A fake monk wearing a khaki kasaya received the man. The two of them shook hands politely, and the fake monk made a "please" gesture. A middle-aged man wearing a suit and leather shoes, with the temperament of a businessman, Ling Qing, naturally walked at the front. He was used to walking in front and would never stop to wait for others. He was a successful man who could be categorized as a strong man. The man in the suit and the fake monk walked in front together, talking as they walked. From Yi Qian's position, she could faintly see the two of them talking happily under the light of the fire. Ma Ji, who was following the man in the suit, waved his hand behind him. Several men in black suits who were guarding the car immediately followed, fulfilling their duties as bodyguards. Yi Qian's gaze fell on one of the bodyguards. In the undercover photo provided by Captain Deng, this bodyguard was one of them. On the 14th day of entering the Golden Triangle, she finally saw an anti-drug police officer. Finally, a young man in traditional Burmese clothes followed closely. Yi Qian also knew him. He was the first man she met when she entered the Burmese mountain village and lusted after her. A group of dozens of people entered the village. Then, the torches went out again. In less than 10 minutes, the entire village was quiet again. Yi Jian jumped back to the ground and rubbed her hungry stomach with one hand. She had to endure it. She should be able to get a small bowl of water and a pancake on the 9th day. As for the people outside, Captain Deng clearly told her that her mission this time was not to keep an eye on the drug dealers entering and leaving the core area of the Golden Triangle, but to thoroughly investigate where the missing girl went and which villages in the Golden Triangle the new drug chain came from. Although the Golden Triangle was a world-famous drug supply area, there was not only one person who controlled the entire Golden Triangle drug chain. The Golden Triangle of today was formed by local ethnic militants, local warlords, local drug lords, and some villages that produced and supplied their own products. Yi Qian, who sneaked in, could not immediately find out who abducted the young girls and where they went. However, since she found that the skeleton was one of the missing girls, and she was sent to the village to be controlled by a group of fake monks, she faintly felt that the missing girls were likely to be under the unified management and control of several forces after discussion. Chapter 4691. If that was the case, then the Chinese anti-narcotics police would be the enemy of the entire Golden Triangle. Once they found out, not only would the missing girls be in danger, but the Border Patrol Police and Anti-Narcotics Police would also be in great danger. Yi Qian did not pay any more attention to the Anti-Narcotics Police. Since Captain Deng had warned her not to interfere in other things, she would remember not to act on her own. Yi Jian, who hadn't had a full meal for 14 consecutive days and was ignored, curled up in the corner of the wall and continued to sleep in a daze. Yi Jian, who was on the enemy's side, did not sleep well. Apart from waking up from hunger, she was also woken up by the noise outside. The car parked outside started again at about 3 o'clock in the morning. Yi Jian, who woke up again, heard footsteps hurriedly approaching. Not long after, the sound of chains twitching could be heard. Someone opened the door and ordered 2 men in black to come in. Without saying a word, they carried Yi Jian out of the room on both sides. "What are you doing? What are you doing? Let me go, I beg you, let me go home, I beg you, I want to go home, I want to go home." Yi Qian kept begging. Her hoarse and unpleasant voice was so weak that the men in black could not hear what she said clearly. After being hungry for so long, even a person made of iron could not bear it. Yi Qian knew that she had lost weight due to hunger, but she did not know that she was so hungry that she was out of shape. Emoji looked at Yi Qian for a long time and only recognized her from the clothes she had not changed out of. "Why is she still here?" Emoji was very surprised and asked a fake monk accompanying them. The fake monk wearing a khaki cassock was not anyone else. Yi Qian recognized this person from the corner of his eyes. The driver also wore a khaki cassock after returning to the village. "We'll wait for you before leaving," the driver answered simply. Emoji looked at the Chinese girl who was so thin that he almost could not recognize her. He laughed and said, "In your hands, even the most beautiful girl will become the ugliest person. As long as she won't die." The chauffeur smiled coldly, and the ominous glint in his eyes made Emoji shudder inwardly. He had always thought that the driver was just an ordinary driver, but it turned out that he wasn't. Instead, he gave the police of Shan State a headache. Who knew how many Chinese anti-narcotics police and border defense police had died in his hands? With him guarding the stronghold, no one would dare to cause trouble. If they wanted to cause trouble, they would have to consider whether their heads would be blown off by him. Yi Qian was once again dragged into the car. In order to save her energy, Yi Qian, who was in the car, began to feel weak. She cried weakly. She wanted to drink water. She wanted to eat. She was very, very hungry. An apple and a few biscuits were all that Yi Qian had for the past few days. Yi Qian, who had stayed in the village for almost 9 days, was then dragged on a bumpy journey into the depths of the mountains. It took them another 2 days to travel from Shan State to Kachin State in the south of Myanmar. They were getting further and further away from Sheri City. At this point, Yi Qian was no longer locked up alone. Instead, she was locked up with 4 other girls. Yi Jian looked at the 4 girls who were in a daze. She, who was about to collapse, suddenly narrowed her eyes. There were no signs of abuse or beatings on these girls. Their lips were dry and cracked, and they sat with their hands covering their abdomens. They were like her. They had all been starved to the point of collapse. Unfortunately, the 4 girls were all Burmese. Yi Qian could not communicate with them at all. However, this gave Yi Qian a good opportunity to learn the Burmese language. Chapter 46-92. When the 4 girls saw Yi Qian walk in, their black eyes only moved slightly. When they saw Yi Qian, they did not react at all. Even their expressions were very numb. They had been starving for too long. They were so hungry that they did not even have the strength to lift their eyes to look at people. They even thought that it would be better to be free sooner rather than starve day after day. The rusty metal door closed with a creaking sound. Yi Qian, who had been thrown in like a rag, waited until he could no longer hear the footsteps outside before he slowly got up and moved to the 4 girls' side. Her arrival made the girls, who were as still as wooden pillars, move slightly. They looked at Yi Qian, and their gazes fell on the bundle that Yi Qian was holding tightly in his arms. Yi Qian was still thinking about how to communicate with her when suddenly, a girl who looked thin and small, but was very agile and not at all sluggish from before, leaped past the 2 girls in front of her and pounced straight at Yi Qian. Although she was very fast, Yi Qian immediately hugged the bundle tightly when he realized what she was trying to do. He did not let the thin girl take the bundle away from him. There was nothing in the bundle other than clothes. The temperature in the mountains was very low at night. She did not fall sick because she had starved all the way here. She only relied on the thick clothes in the bundle to keep herself warm. The clothes could not be taken away. "Let go, let go, let go," the thin girl who was trying to snatch the bundle said in a low voice. She was determined to live. "Let go. Do you hear me? I want to eat, I want to eat. Let go of me now." She stared at Yi Qian. Her sluggish eyes, which were like a pool of stagnant water, were no longer filled with despair. Instead, all hope was ignited. There seemed to be a fire burning in her eyes. Yi Qian could clearly see her desire to live. Yi Qian did not understand what she was saying at all. He only knew that she was trying to snatch his bundle away. The more she tried to snatch it away, the more Yi Qian did not want to give it away. He hugged it tightly and shouted in Chinese, "What are you doing? Let go. This is mine, this is mine." One snatched while the other defended. In the end, both of them fell to the ground. Not only did they have to use their hands, they also used their legs. The skinny girl was no match for Yi Qian, so she had no choice but to call for help. In Burmese, she screamed at the three girls who were just watching and not moving. "Why aren't you moving? She must have food on her. Aren't you hungry? Don't you want to eat? Don't you want to live?" One of the girls' expression changed. The skinny girl's words had piqued her interest. She was also very hungry. She also wanted to eat. She also wanted to live. The other girl, who was slightly older, pulled her back and shook her head gently. The two of them looked very similar, so it was very likely that they were sisters. There was also a girl who closed her eyes. She was so scared that she was trembling. On the other hand, Yi Qian only knew that the other party's voice suddenly became shrill. That was a scream that used all the strength in her body. Her excitement reached its peak and then suddenly dropped. Then, she no longer had the strength to snatch the bundle away from Yi Qian's arms. Her hands finally let go. When she realized that she no longer had the strength to snatch the bundle away, her eyes widened. Her facial features became ferocious, and she pounced on Yi Qian like a madwoman. "Food, food, I want to eat, I want to eat," she kept repeating herself. She was too hungry. She was so hungry that she could even drink a mouthful of water. Yi Qian was confused and could vaguely guess what she was trying to do. Yi Qian, who was retreating, looked a little flustered. He opened the bundle, took out a few pieces of clothing, and shook them vigorously. He used his actions to tell the other party that there was really nothing in the bundle. There was really nothing. Chapter 46-93. The girl who was trying to snatch the bag kept staring at Yi Qian. Her eyes did not move at all. When Yi Qian threw away all the clothes in the bag, the flame in the girl's eyes died down bit by bit. Her last hope was gone. Ah! Her hope was shattered again. The thin girl screamed even more desperately. Then she threw herself on the ground and cried loudly. Seeing this, the oldest girl among the four moved her body with difficulty. She even lost the strength to stand up. She crawled to the crying girl and comforted her in Burmese in a low voice. Yi Qian had met 4 Burmese girls in such an environment. Like her, they had been abducted and sold, sent to the depths of the Golden Triangle, and starved all the time. Yi Qian knew that the 4 girls had been detained on the same day. The 2 sisters had been sent in the morning. The thin girl and the other girl, who looked quite timid, had been together. As for how long they had been detained, they all shook their heads, indicating that they did not know how long they had been detained. It seemed that time had stopped in the depths of the mountains. No one knew how much time had passed in the mountains. Suwon had been waiting for Yi Qian's call. She had sent countless messages to Yi Qian and called her back countless times. Since the beginning of the year, she had not received any reply from Yi Qian until the beginning of the semester. Seeing this, Song Jiqiu hugged her girlfriend's shoulder gently and said in a low voice, "You should know that Yi Qian is different from us. She might have gone somewhere to deal with something. When she is done, she will naturally come back to school." "Different from us? What's the difference?" Suwon frowned slowly. There was an inquisitive look in her eyes. "Do you know something?" "Like you, I don't know anything. But you should think about the difference between Yi Jian and us. You can't contact her. I think it's not that she doesn't want to contact you, but that it's inconvenient for her to do so. So, no matter how many times you call her or send her messages, she can't reply to you. What's the difference between her and me?" Suwon was lost in thought. Song Jiqiu sighed silently and frowned secretly. There had been no news from Yi Qian for so long. Was the task she was carrying out difficult? What was her mission? There were only 2 days left before school reopened. Suwon no longer checked her phone every time she returned to the dormitory to see if she had received any replies. She vaguely understood why her boyfriend said that Yi Qian was different. After the New Year and the Lantern Festival, the students returned to school one after another. The day before school started, all the students who had to report back to school had arrived. Yi Qian, however, had not returned. Suwon's phone had to be turned in again because school was about to start. Without any news from Yi Qian, she felt uneasy and waited with Yi Jing. On the 3rd day of school, the two of them went to look for the teacher together. The teacher also did not know where Yi Qian had gone. He only knew that Yi Qian had other plans and that his return time was uncertain. "Don't worry. I thought you guys were used to Yi Qian disappearing from time to time. She's fine. It's just that she's busy right now and can't return to school on time." Yi Jing frowned slightly and asked, "Is she in danger?" "Danger?" The teacher was stunned. He laughed and said, "What danger can there be in the army? Don't worry, especially Suwon. You're in your senior year. You can't relax your control just because Yi Qian is not by your side. The closer you are to the end, the more you have to persevere. When Yi Qian comes back, I'll ask her to test you and see if you've regressed. She's going to the army." Hearing this, Suwon felt that the stone in her heart had been removed instantly. She smiled at the teacher and said, "Then I won't disturb you. Have a rest. Goodbye, teacher." Chapter 46-94. After that, Suwon did not ask where Yi Qian had gone, and neither did Yi Jing. However, when the two returned to the dorm, they would first look at the empty bed. Every night before going to bed, they would spread out the army green quilt and fold it into tofu pieces the next morning. Everything was carried out according to the rules of the three of them being together. Yi Qian, who Suwon kept a close eye on, was still worrying about 3 meals a day. No one paid any attention to them. Every 2 days, they would starve, and on the 3rd day, a bowl of water and a pancake would be delivered punctually. No matter how the 5 of them begged the person who delivered the food, his lips seemed to be glued shut. No matter what the girls said, he would not answer. His silence made the girls feel more and more hopeless, and their negative emotions grew stronger and stronger. The skinny girl who snatched Yi Qian's bag began to show signs of self-harm. In the middle of the night, she kept banging her head against the wall. The other girls were so hungry that they forced themselves to sleep that they did not notice. Yi Qian, who had always been vigilant, opened her eyes and listened carefully to where the banging sound was coming from. Only then did she notice that something was wrong. She knew who was banging her head against the wall, but she did not act rashly. Instead, she chose to listen quietly. She could not act rashly. Before she found the missing girls and figured out the new drug delivery chain, she could not interfere with anything. Even if a life was about to be destroyed in front of her, she only had one choice: to watch calmly from the sidelines. Today, Yi Qian and the 4 girls had been locked up together for 8 days. Tomorrow, it was time to deliver water and pancake. A bowl of water and a pancake were Yi Qian's only hope of not starving to death. The banging sound did not last long. Yi Qian slowly closed her eyes when she heard no more noise. She had a bad premonition. The next day, Yi Qian saw that the skinny girl who snatched her bag to see if there was food had a bruise on her forehead. It was a shocking sight. When the other 3 girls saw this, they crawled to the skinny girl's side and asked her softly with concern. The skinny little girl didn't say anything. Her head was lowered, and no one knew what she was thinking. Seeing this, the 2 sisters no longer surrounded them and retreated to the corner, leaving only the other girl to accompany them. After about a few minutes, the skinny little girl took the initiative to talk to the other girl. His voice was very, very soft. He was so weak that he had to pause several times in the middle of his sentence. Yi Qian didn't pay much attention to it, but the other party's gaze intentionally or unintentionally glanced in her direction a few times. This made Yi Qian feel both puzzled and wary. The 2 of them seemed to be discussing something. Today, it was time to deliver water and pancake. The iron gate opened on time again. The Burmese man who delivered water and pancakes to them every time appeared on time and took out the water and pancakes from the bamboo basket. There were 5 servings in total. After putting them down, he left immediately. Every time he left, the 5 girls would only dare to crawl over and grab their share after he left. Yi Qian also took her share. Just as she was about to turn around, her back suddenly tensed up. She felt someone staring at her from behind, waiting for her to turn around. Yi Qian, who was so thin that she didn't have much flesh on her body, narrowed her eyes slightly. She didn't immediately turn around. Instead, she chose to eat the pancakes with her back to them. The 2 girls who were staring at Yi Qian exchanged glances. They put their pancakes into their pockets and rushed forward at the same time. The 2 girls began to fight for the food. Their first target was Yi Qian. They had a plan and were waiting for this moment to come. The 2 sisters weren't part of their plan. First, there were 2 of them. Second, they were both Burmese. They didn't want to attack them. But it didn't mean that the platoon wouldn't attack them next. Chapter 46-95. The younger sister was frightened. She sat on the ground and kicked her legs, not forgetting to grab 2 palm-sized pancakes. She stuffed them into her mouth as she retreated. She was afraid that her pancake would be snatched away. The older sister immediately protected the younger sister and retreated. She didn't dare to join the fight, nor did she have the thought of snatching someone else's pancake. Yi Qian, who was here on a mission, wouldn't give anyone a chance to snatch the pancake away. She also wouldn't sympathize and give up the brand in her hand. The 2 girls rushed over, but Yi Qian nimbly avoided them. Seeing this, the 2 sisters couldn't help but lean back. At the same time, they held the brand in their hands tightly. They looked at the 2 girls who collided with each other in shock. Yi Qian's avoidance caused the girls to collide with each other. Their foreheads hit each other, and the sound of bones colliding could be heard. This collision was a little fierce. The 2 girls fell to the ground. They saw stars and blackouts. At the same time, one of the girl's pancakes fell out of her pocket and fell beside the skinny girl's leg. The girl who didn't have a pancake didn't notice it. The skinny girl's eyes lit up. She picked up the pancake and crawled to a corner, ignoring the blackout in front of her eyes. She wolfed down the pancake in a short while. The girl who didn't have a pancake realized that her pancake was gone. She didn't expect the skinny girl to snatch her pancake and was still looking for it. No one reminded her. The 2 sisters didn't remind her. They only kept reminding her with their eyes. They also looked at the skinny girl who was eating the second pancake. The girl who didn't even take care of her pancake was only looking around and didn't notice. The 2 sisters didn't want to cause trouble, so they chose to keep quiet. Yi Qian, on the other hand, was eating the pancake and drinking water. The other party wanted to snatch her pancake, and it was a premeditated robbery. Why should she sympathize with a criminal who committed murder? No wonder the 2 of them were talking in the morning. She hadn't guessed wrong. They were discussing something. They were discussing how to snatch her pancake. The pancake was cold and hard, but Yi Qian ate it all. Even when the girl fell to the ground without the pancake, Yi Qian did not show any sympathy. In the end, the two sisters each left a small half of the pancake for the girl who couldn't find the pancake and was so hungry that her eyes rolled back and she looked like she was going to die at any moment. After receiving 2 pancakes, the skinny little girl finally felt full. At the same time, Yi Qian saw that her eyes narrowed slightly, as if she was plotting something. Seeing this, Yi Qian's mind flashed with a very vague feeling. It surged up quickly and then disappeared in the blink of an eye. She seemed to have grasped something, but before she could think deeply about it, it suddenly disappeared. The skinny girl licked her lips and crawled towards Yi Qian. Yi Qian stared at her and slowly retreated. The strange feeling that flashed through his mind appeared again. This time, Yi Qian grasped it tightly. In that instant, his heart was in turmoil and his expression changed. The trouble that happened today was probably the beginning of the worst. It was quickly verified. The next time, there would only be 4 pancakes. This meant that there was definitely one more pancake that hadn't eaten yet. The girl who lost the pancake didn't wait for the person who scared her to leave. She immediately pounced and tried to take 2 pancakes. The skinny little girl, who was already strong and wanted 2 pancakes, didn't want to be left behind. She fiercely bumped into the first girl who pounced to snatch the pancake and said something in Burmese. With a fierce expression, she was the first to snatch 2 pancakes. Chapter 46-96. She took 2 portions, and the remaining 2 portions had to be split among the 4 of them. This time, even the 2 sisters did not agree. The situation instantly went out of control. The 4 Burmese girls fought over the food. Yi Qian was the first to get the pancake. At night, the skinny girl who managed to get 2 portions was taken away. She did not return until dawn. Yi Jian stretched her numb legs, and there was a hint of seriousness in her eyes. She had to observe for a while longer. She did not know if it was as she thought. The most ruthless, and the one who fought for their own benefits would end their hunger early. The next time, Yi Qian confirmed her suspicions. The second girl was taken away that night. She also did not return. When it was time to deliver water and biscuits again, Yi Jian started to snatch the water and biscuits. She had already stayed here for 20 days, so she had to start snatching because she needed to leave this place. She needed to hurry up and investigate. This time, the one who was taken away was Yi Qian. Spring had come quietly. The ginkgo trees and willow leaves on campus seemed to have sprouted overnight. They welcomed the warm spring breeze, and the faded colors of the seasons were replaced by the fresh green of spring. A row of dark green figures walked through the trees. Their steps were orderly and powerful. They walked forward with fearless determination. The 4th-year students were beginning their final year of study. The compulsory and elective courses were the focus of the 4th-year students. As for the physical training, it was still the same. They continued to train as usual. The students of the command faculty heard the most from the instructors in charge of their training. Every time they saw that the results were not ideal, they would say, "Without Yi Qian, I'm not even interested in training you. Look at your result. Look at your result. Is this reasonable? Is this reasonable? If Yi Qian comes back, he'll crush you in minutes. I say, did you guys not eat? Are you still asleep? Yi Jian isn't here. Don't you have anyone to compare with? Do you think you're so great? Look at all of you. You're saying that the training is too heavy. Did Yi Qian say that it's too heavy? She thinks it's not enough. Such an outstanding person is still working hard. What about you guys? Do you think you're as outstanding as Yi Qian?" Although Yi Qian did not come to school, his presence was stronger than when he was here. During every training session, the students were extremely nervous. They were afraid that the instructors would compare them to Yi Qian. Yi Jian was a legendary existence. Most people were mediocre and incompetent. How could it be so easy to become a legend? Since he could not become a legend, he naturally could not be compared to the legendary Yi Jian. There was no harm in bringing it up for comparison, but once there was a comparison, the damage was huge. He Jing took advantage of her height and patted Su Wen's head. She smiled and said, "That's good. I'll let you know that even without Jane Eyre you can't slack off. The instructors are right. Our Jane Eyre is so amazing. Who dares to say no? Do you see how many people will stand up for her? Train obediently. Don't think you can be arrogant just because you found a boyfriend. People who take the postgraduate entrance exam have no right to waste time. Understand?" Su Wen, who chose to take the postgraduate entrance exam, immersed herself in the sea of learning. She finally felt that she did not have enough time to spend. She finally understood why Yi Qian always said that there was not enough time. Chapter 46-97. Without Yi Jian by her side, Su Wen did not relax herself. Occasionally, she also wanted to relax and slack off. However, her boyfriend, Song Jiqiu, appeared out of nowhere and supervised her in a domineering yet gentle manner. Su Wen was a typical person who could be persuaded by reason but not cowed by force. As for Song Jiqiu, she was smart. Although it was always Song Jiqiu who made concessions, in fact, it was Su Wen who was led by Song Jiqiu. She was so willing that she even thought she had won over her boyfriend. Every time He Jing saw that Su Wen was won over by Song Jiqiu with a few words and that Song Jiqiu even betrayed her, He Jing would secretly give Song Jiqiu a thumbs up. Su Wen was lazy. Although Yi Qian corrected many of her small problems and even corrected a lot of the laziness in her bones, she did not have good self-control. Usually, she would show her true colors after a short while. At this time, she needed someone to supervise and remind her. Since Yi Qian was not here, Song Jiqiu took over. She enjoyed it and liked it very much. In private, Su Wen obviously threw a tantrum several times, but Song Jiqiu was not angry. Instead, she smiled at He Jing and said, "You are very cute. The more I look at you, the cuter you are. The more I look at you, the more I like you." He Jing, who was speechless, almost vomited because of his mushy words. She did not expect Song Jiqiu's understanding of cute to be so weird. There was always an insurmountable chasm between men and women. Su Wen was very good at acting like a spoiled child. She knew when to stop. Sometimes she was barbaric, sometimes she was charming, and sometimes she was a little emotional. To some extent, she had Song Jiqiu under control. He Jing thought they were a match made in heaven. One was willing to be hit while the other was willing to be hit. She appreciated the relationship between Yi Qian and her boyfriend, whose surname was Xia. It was a normal relationship. It was not as mushy as Su Wen and Song Jiqiu, which made people want to avoid them. The 4th year seemed to pass very quickly. Only then did she feel that the willow leaves were beginning to sprout. When she looked up again, she saw that the peach blossoms had already withered, and small green fruits were hanging on the branches. In the blink of an eye, spring was coming to an end and was about to pass. Yi Qian, who was the target of many students and teachers, entered the western part of Langbang Province in Laos. Langpang Province was also part of the Golden Triangle. Jean Sanja's territory included Shan State and Kabang of Burma, Thailand's Qing Prefecture and My Prefecture to the north, Laos Luang Ta Province, Shaili Prefecture, Usiai Prefecture and the western part of Langpang Province. There were more than 3,000 villages and towns of various sizes. 2 days ago, Yi Qian was still in Kabang in northern Burma. 2 days later, she was in the western part of Langbang Province in Laos. She was going to complete the first drug trade in her life here. It was already May. It had been 4 months since Yi Qian entered Burma before the Spring Festival. After starving for a whole month, Yi Qian chose to be obedient and survive. She became a slave who could be abandoned by the drug kings at any time and be pushed out to take bullets at any time. She had no human rights at all. That night, Yi Qian was taken out and sent to a very beautiful woman who wore traditional Burmese women's clothes. The woman did not say anything. She just stretched out her hand, which had long and sharp nails and was painted with red nail polish, to lift Yi Qian's chin. After she looked at Yi Qian carefully, she left a deep nail mark on Yi Qian's chin with a few drops of blood. After she finished looking, she waved her hand. The two men who had carried Yi Qian here carried Yi Qian again and walked into the dark depths of the forest without any light. At that moment, Yi Qian was ready to run away. Chapter 46-98. In the end, she did not want to threaten her life. Instead, she wanted her to stand in front of the vertical hole that could only fit one person at a time. The hole emitted a nauseating stench. The woman, who was as beautiful as a snake, gently stroked the back of Yi Qian's neck and smiled coldly. "Do you want to survive?" She spoke in Chinese. Of course, Yi Qian wanted to live. She nodded obediently, but there was a look of horror on her face that made the woman giggle. In the middle of the night, in the dark forest that was as dark as the entrance to hell, the woman's laughter was delicate, but there was a darkness that made people feel afraid. "You have to be good. I like obedient children the most. As for disobedient children..." A second ago, she was still smiling, but in the next second, she suddenly pressed down on Yi Qian's neck and forced Yi Qian to nod. She then looked into the bottomless hole that was shrouded in a foul stench. The flashlight shone nearby, illuminating the seemingly bottomless hole. The nauseated Yi Qian saw clearly what was at the bottom of the hole, and her pupils constricted instantly. Wretch, the acid in her stomach and the bitter water in her bile rushed out of her throat, and Yi Qian vomited. It wasn't because he was afraid that he vomited. Instead, it was because the pile of white bones beneath him had severely damaged his vision and soul. All of his reactions were focused on his stomach, and he couldn't control his body's reaction at all. He vomited directly. The dark hole was filled with bones, and there were even undecayed limbs. "Little Yi, this world is darker than we imagined. You have to remember, darkness is not scary. What's scary is the representation of justice, but ignoring the darkness and allowing it to grow. That's what's scary." This world was darker and scarier than she imagined. Even though she had walked through a blood-soaked battlefield, what she saw in front of her sent chills down her spine. How many people were buried below? How many people had died in their hands? How dark could a person's heart be? How bad could it be? Would there be an end to the bad? Yi Qian vomited until her stomach hurt, and tears welled up in her eyes. Would there be an end to the bad? She was afraid there was no end. The woman's chilling laughter echoed in Yi Qian's ears. For several nights in a row, Yi Qian would wake up from nightmares. For several nights in a row, he could still hear the woman's laughter. It was cold, sinister, and inhuman. Why did the Chinese anti-narcotics police vow to fight to the death with the Golden Triangle drug dealers? Why did they continue to move forward and continue to fight to sweep away the darkness even though they knew that the road ahead was full of dangers and that one day they might fall behind and sleep here forever? The piles of bones were the best answer. Because there was justice in the heart. That night, Yi Qian found out that this woman was the trainer who trained all the abducted girls. In the following days, she was trained by this vicious woman. The days of training were torturous. Of the girls who were locked up, only 3 made it through, and 2 disappeared without a trace. The first to disappear was the girl who had lost her cooked rice. After that, the younger sister of the sisters disappeared. She was still around that night, but they were never seen again the next morning. Her elder sister had cried and asked, but she was beaten up in return. She was told that if she wanted to see her younger sister, she had to be obedient. Where did the 2 of them go? No one knew. Of the remaining three, the first to leave alive from the vicious woman was the skinny girl, then her elder sister, and finally Yi Qian. Yi Qian, who survived, had the opportunity to come to Laos today. Chapter 46-99. Before entering Laos, Yi Qian thought that it would take some time, but unexpectedly, everything went smoothly. Even though she had drugs on her, she entered Laos without a hitch. When she encountered the local police, Yi Qian, who was coming out for the first time, broke out in a cold sweat. In the end, it was a false alarm. They didn't even check on her. The drug dealer who was in charge of the exchange gave one of the Laos police a roll of US dollar bills, and even casually searched their luggage before letting them go. If this were China, no drug dealer would dare to be so impudent. China was one of the most strict countries in the world in terms of drug prohibition, and its harshness often drew criticism from Western countries. No other country was as strict as China in terms of drug prohibition. No matter how much drugs were used, once they were caught, they would be held criminally responsible. More than 100 years ago, because of opium, China became a country riddled with holes. In the end, the mountains and rivers collapsed. Countless people died in the war, and countless people were destroyed by drugs. With history as a mirror, one could see the rise and fall of China, and that was how China became so strict in its drug prohibition. Yi Qian, who saw with his own eyes that he could buy and sell with just money, shuddered in the depths of his heart. After successfully entering Laos, Yi Qian changed into Laos' traditional clothes. He hadn't cut his hair since the winter break, and his long black hair was combed into a high bun. He changed into a brightly colored tube skirt and a matching shawl. He wore gold and silver bracelets on both of his hands, and followed closely behind the venomous woman named Lena. After entering Laos, he immediately got into the car that had been sent to pick him up. It was a black Benz, and the interior was extremely luxurious. One bodyguard immediately opened the car door, while another stood on the side vigilantly. The venomous woman, Lena, got into the car first, followed by Yi Qian. The car drove into the border county, and finally stopped in front of the most luxurious and ethnic hotel in the county. A doorman immediately came over to open the car door, and politely asked Lena to get out first, followed by Yi Qian. As for the bodyguard, he got out of the car himself, and there was no need for the doorman to serve him. The sun at the end of May was just right, and it shone brightly on the azure blue sky. Yi Qian couldn't help but squint when he got out of the car, as if he had forgotten to follow Lena's footsteps. Lena, who was walking in front of him, swaying her hips like a snake, realized that the person behind her wasn't following her. She stood still and elegantly turned around. Although there was a smile on her lips, her eyes were cold, and she waved at Yi Qian. "Little cutie, hurry up and follow me." Lena's face, as if he had never seen the world, caused Lena, who had never seen such a scene. Lena couldn't help but frown. She raised her hand, slowly touched Yi's face, Aunt's face, she's. Lena, like a poisonous needle needles, a poison needle like a needle. Poison, Lena. She, be. The weather at the end of May was already very hot. Lena's hands were just like her. No matter how hot the weather was, they were cold like a snake, sinister and cold. She chuckled softly and said, "You need to slow down and relax your expression. I need a beautiful and obedient girl. I don't need a girl who is as stiff as a rock, and completely uninteresting. It's so good to be young. Her face is so soft, and it feels like playing a piano. Every touch is so addictive. Such a good face, such a tender body, and so beautiful. Let's not talk about whether men would like her, even a woman like her would like her." She liked her so much that she couldn't help but want to destroy her. She had to endure. She had to endure. Chapter 4700. It wasn't easy to train a new product. It would be a waste to destroy it so quickly, especially with such a beautiful face. Tsk, 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 if only it was hers. Unfortunately, it wasn't hers, so it was better to destroy it. Be good, little cutie. When you take out the good stuff later, remember to introduce it seriously. If the customer is satisfied, there will be a reward. If not. Her sharp nails scratched Yi Qian's chin, and a sharp pain suddenly came. Yi Qian instantly felt a burning pain on his chin. Be good, do you understand? Yi Qian, who was in so much pain that tears welled up in his eyes, nodded frantically and replied in Burmese, I will be good, I will definitely satisfy Sister Lena. Wrong. Lena's eyes flashed with ruthlessness. You don't have to satisfy me, you have to satisfy the customer, understand? Sister Lena will only be satisfied if the customer is satisfied. Yes, I understand. I will definitely satisfy the customer. Sister Lena, don't worry, I will be good. Yi Qian's eyes were filled with tears, and his face was filled with deep fear. Lena was satisfied that he didn't dare to resist, and she let go of her hand. She didn't forget to pat Yi Qian's face lightly. That's more like it. Sister Lena likes obedient little cuties. When Lena turned around, she didn't see Yi Qian, who was afraid a second ago. The moment she turned around, her dark eyes flashed with coldness. The girls who were abducted and sold to Burmese were all under her control, and then brought out to hide drugs and sell them. From hiding drugs in their bodies, to hiding drugs with their looks, and then to recommending drugs with their looks. If the customer had any requests, the girls who hid the drugs had to satisfy them unconditionally. If there was any resistance, they would be beaten or killed. Her methods were so cruel that it made one's hair stand on end. A new, even more inhumane drug chain was born. No one thought that it was against humanity, and only recognized the benefits it brought. And Yi Qian was one of the people who could bring benefits to Lena's group. In order to prevent Yi Qian from escaping, she had 2 bodyguards following behind her. The bodyguards didn't hide any drugs, only Yi Qian did. A total of 50 grams of high-purity ice seed, mainly supplied to Europe, America, North America and other countries. Lena entered the 4th floor and pushed open the Japanese-style sliding door. Lena, who had a cold expression a moment ago, bent over and entered the door with a smile blooming on her face. She clasped her hands together and waited in the room, greeting the buyers from the Western countries. She could speak fluent English with an authentic American accent. She sounded more like an American than a Burmese. The interior of the house was also decorated in the Japanese style. There was a raised floor, and the entire floor was covered with a plain carpet. There were tatami mats, a tea room, a chess room, and a sparring room. The most conspicuous thing was 2 crossed katanas, which could be seen upon entering. Including Lena, there were 6 people in the spacious room. The 2 buyers from North America were introduced to Lena, and they quickly chatted. Yi Qian did not go in immediately. Instead, he waited outside for Lena's instructions before going in. After about 3 minutes, the tightly shut sliding door opened again. Lena walked out and held Yi Qian's hand as they went in together. One of the 2 bodyguards went in, while the other stayed outside to keep watch. The high-purity ice seed was removed from Yi Qian's calf. Lena personally bent over to retrieve it, and then handed it to Yi Qian. In turn, Yi Qian handed it to the North American customer sitting across from him. The newest purity. The quantity is very small. I hope you will be satisfied. Yi Qian introduced in Burmese. The 2 buyers from North America did not immediately take the goods. Instead, they smiled and asked the person who introduced them, "Is this the special deal you were talking about? You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories."